trustee Pearson was not able to make the dates that you all selected that you were able to come to these meetings. So because of that, we are so happy to have Trustee Vallow with us. So if you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll go around and introduce ourselves as well.
I am Trustee Valle from Zone 2. Tracy asked me if I could take a place basically because she couldn't make the meetings. But first of all, I just want to thank everybody for what you do. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time consuming. So, yeah, we all have things to do, right? But I'm willing to put in my time, and I hope you are too. So,
Thank you.
I'm Jan Lincoln. I'm a community member. I'm Megan Stroke, a parent. Ashley Wilbur, School of Central. Anna Hay, kindergarten 1. Just from her 3rd grade, Centennial. Stephanie Biggs, parent. And Tammy Stephen Sickford, English Language Arts, kindergarten through 12th grade in our district. Awesome. So we're going to do a quick agenda review. So you should all have a copy of it in front of you. If you would just look through that, and also make sure to review our working agreements really quickly. Kristen Lucas. That's our only person missing. And sometimes there she is. We were just talking about who was missing. I was going to say something. Oh, yeah. So this is just a Monday. Scheduling conflicts. Okay.
I'd like to mention that I'm back from there. So, perspective aside, I'm
Any questions about the agenda before we get started? All right, so this is our tentative plan. Today is that first meeting, April 6th, where we're going to look at criteria, rubric, and talk about publishers. And then between tomorrow and April 20th, whoever we identify as publishers, we're reaching out and asking them to send samples, and hopefully they can get them to us by April 20th. Then our next tentative meeting is April 20th, where we would review then those publishers based on our criteria and select up to 4 to bring in for presentations. And then giving those publishers time between April 21st and May 4th to book flights or whatever needs to happen to get them here. Hopefully we'll have 2 on May 4th. They'll present each for an hour. We'll have time for questions. And then hopefully we'll have 2 on May 9th. Same thing, present each will have an hour. And then on May 5th, or sorry, not May 5th, meeting 5 would be scoring, discussion, and then scoring. Which would be May 11th, and then the school board, we're not sure what date yet. They'll be looking at our recommendation, but it will be hopefully after the May 11th meeting. Questions about that?
I do. At what point are we going to be looking at the rubric and what we want from it?
Yes, so that's actually today.
Okay.
After we're going to dive into criteria first. And Scott is going to talk about the difference between criteria and rubric. But we're gonna nail down criteria today and rubric because both of those things will be shared with publishers. And they're gonna have to do some responding to both of those pieces before we have our April 20th meeting. other wonderings, questions about this?
So then after our discussion on meeting 5, discussion and scoring, so then just our scores will then go to the board. All right?
Yep, and we'll get deeper into that, but yes.
So, and I'll add to that just to remind everybody. So by and large, minus just a couple tweaks, the procedure we had you guys review and edit last time was adopted and is in place. So once again, our end goal as a committee, we are here to advise the board on an adoption. What we're going to present is a quantitative ranking of our final candidates, 1 through 4, 1 through 3, 1 through 2, however many we decide to bring through the presentation rubric thing. And then we'll also provide a qualitative feedback, so to speak, similar to what we had prepared last time. And then that gives, like I said, the more information and the better we can educate the board on what we come up with as a committee, so to speak, that gives the board more information to make their decision on. So, does that help?
All right, and you can just continue because we're up to discussing criteria versus rubric.
Okay, and so we wanted to create some common understanding of what we talk about when we talk about the two different pieces of criteria and rubric and how that is related to what we're going to ask publishers to present to us. So criteria is more broad components of a literacy program. And so when we would send what we're going to ask for a correlation or a connection of criteria for this particular topic. So first off would be, what and how do you address the 5 pillars of literacy that we've all learned about? And then we would probably also say that the writing component goes along with that. So there's some major components, so to speak, that we would need you from a criteria standpoint. Do you offer differentiation specifically to some of the subgroups of populations that we serve, right? Like we all know that depending on the school and depending on the year, we're anywhere from 8 to maybe as high as 14, 15% LEP, sometimes even a little bit higher, depending on your school. So
What is LEP?
language,
Limiting English.
limited proficiency, but really it's EL, sorry, English language. So the kids that are, students that are developing English as a subject.
Just to let you know, when you give initial or whatever, I'm gonna always be
Yes.
asking, because I forget.
And call us out on it, yes, we often will talk in educationese, and it's hard to move out of that mode. So criteria is broader picture stuff. Also, like we'll be asking them, how does your curriculum align to the Idaho core standards? So it's broad stuff that isn't necessarily scored. It's more, can you meet these? How well do you meet these? What does that look like in that broad spectrum, so to speak? Where a rubric is more for our lens and more used into the nuts and bolts. And now we can really get into those subcomponents and very detailed pieces of a curriculum resource and talk about things like how well does it address certain phonemic awareness components? How well does it address spelling? How well does it address? So very similar to what we already had as a rubric, so to speak, but more of the very detailed nuts and bolts pieces. So, and the audience changes a little bit. So criteria is more as a publisher, if you want to be part of our process, here's some things we need you to explain to us that your program does to meet. One of the examples I used the other night for the board meeting is take it out of this context, right? Go to a math context. If we were looking to look at adopting a middle school math curriculum, like one of the criteria obviously would be a geometry component, a geometry strand, a geometry piece of what you do to address the cluster of standards we need through 6th and 7th grade related to geometry. If you don't have that, and our goal is to adopt a comprehensive resource to the best of our ability, then you probably are not a publisher that would qualify to be part of our process. So that's where criteria comes in. Once you've met the criteria, now let's get in the nitty gritty. What are the nuts and bolts? Now let's starting to tease out what you do well, what maybe you don't do quite so well. So that's the rubric piece. And then our shift from our last attempt at this to our new attempt at this is that rubric's going to have a quantitative piece to it. And that's part of what we're going to address tonight, is build out what we want that quantitative piece to look like. So we'll get to that as we get into to. Just wanted to make sure we all kind of understood the language of criteria and rubric and the role and what those two different things do for us. Okay?
So rubrics is, if we want to make sure that it fits our community, that's what we put in those, right? Okay, so we get this big thing from all these different publishers, and then we see what fits with our community and what we're trying to achieve. Right, that's what we make the rubrics.
Right, so the criteria gives the publisher the information that says, here's what we're looking for. We need your product to be able to do this for us, okay? And then if we choose them to be one of the 4 we want to dig into, then they would give a presentation, and then also we would evaluate them through that rubric lens. And then, yes, that's where you add things.
Don't you think?
So nuts and bolts is
I
where
know
that
just got a
goes.
question, I don't want to take your time, but I'm wondering, would it be better to have the rubrics in place before we send information to the publishers so that they know exactly what we're looking for?
Our plan is to send the rubric as well.
Okay.
We would tell them, here's the criteria, here's where we need you to make your correlation. To give you an idea, here's where we currently are at with a rubric. I wouldn't tie us exactly into the rubric in case we wanted to tweak it a little in between the invite and not, but certainly, yes, we would also, and in our first round, we're a little bit ahead of normal on this. We've already developed a rubric, right? So by and large, that rubric's gonna look probably fairly similar. We've already broken out these details, and we shared that rubric with the publishers that came to us the first attempt. So yes, they're not shooting blind on it as well.
I'm sure I'm blind because I don't have.
Yes, you are. We have a lot of catching up to do. We'll get you there.
And
The
there's
rubric is
still
a lot.
time to make the tweaks and changes to the rubric if we need to.
We're working on the rubric tonight.
Yeah, we're
Yes.
gonna do that.
Yes.
But it's a lot of educational, like it's the science of reading pieces that we're looking for on the rubric too, right? Like detailed stuff.
Right, and then a question that is a direct result of the conversations that we had last time. Are we going to be having equal weight for all of the criteria on the rubric, or are we going to be weighting different criteria?
Hold that question
Sorry.
because yes, that is part of what we're gonna do with the rubric tonight.
Okay,
Okay?
But you're all gonna decide.
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Sorry.
So, and I guess also just so everybody's aware, like what Tammy's done such a great job of building out for us here. This is ideas and proposal. This is our starting point. The committee, which is not Tammy and I, the committee needs to approve and say, yes, this is what the criteria is going to be, and then it's going to be the same with the rubric. Okay? All right. So obviously, not wanting to start clearly from scratch, we're going to give you a starting point. But this is all editable and then eventually reaching an agreeable point of what these 2 documents are going to say and look like.
I failed to come prepared. Do we have copies of the previous rubric that we could use as a sample? Okay, never mind.
We got
Thank
you.
you.
Yes, we do.
All right.
All right, so we're gonna look at criteria for the qualification first. So we have the side that has the Nampa School District at the top. Again, this is just a draft, so this is all editable, revisable. So go ahead, take a minute and read through this. Think, what don't we need on here? What is missing? And then we'll share out. All right. So discussion, things that are missing, edits, things that might need to be removed. Thoughts?
So for the benefit of those who may not be, so we went over some of the terms last time, but just for the benefit of everyone, it might be helpful, at least to me, a refresher of some of the terms. For example, tier 1 instruction, I'm sure the publishers will understand it,
Yes.
but could we define that a little bit more?
Yep.
And yeah, I'll just start there.
Yeah, so tier 1 instruction, great question, is just like instruction for everybody. It's like kind of the base instruction. So we typically talk about tier 1 instruction is for everyone. Tier 2 is for like on grade level standards, kids who are just, missing a couple pieces of that, just need a little extra help to get there, or maybe they need challenge. Maybe they've already got that instruction, but they need a little challenge. That would be tier 2. And then tier 3 would be instruction that's below grade level, anything that kids need. Right, so tier 1 is like on grade level instruction. Great question. And then those other pieces, phonological awareness, that came out in our reading that we did months ago, but that's the sound piece of our language, and then phonics is just connecting the sound to the letter. Fluency is just that ability to do those things automatically, which is really important, especially when you get to like 4th grade where you start reading to learn rather than learning to read, and you have to acquire knowledge through your reading. So fluency really comes into play there. Vocabulary is pretty typical. We all know what that is. And then comprehension is just understanding what you read and then writing. The Idaho Reading Indicator in that 3rd bullet is the state assessment that all of our kindergarten through 3rd grade students take. And we set goals around that. The state supplies us with funds based on those scores. And then the Idaho Standards Achievement Test is the ISAT in our 3rd through now 11th grade. This is the first year it changed to 11th grade. Take that assessment in the spring. Any other terms on there that we should clarify? All right, so then back to what needs added or removed.
So, another question on the bullet point that talks about assessments. It says some of these assessments must align with these standardized tests that everyone must take. Is there any benefit or value in defining rather, what we mean by some? Is it end of unit tests, or is it specific types of assessments that should align, or is it, okay, so you have 5. Is there any benefit in clarifying that?
I think because when we share this with them and they're going to send, like, it'll be interesting to see just what, how they respond to that.
Okay.
Other thoughts? Do you feel like we need to clarify the word some a little more?
And what kind of detail I would picture that going on the rubric side? Because I think that's a good point, but I think that we'll kind of get into the nitty-gritty once we're looking at the rubric with material.
I would say spelling somewhere. Just how we address it, especially for Nampa, because we know that is something very important. So everyone know how they're gonna address that. Probably, some multilingual or somewhere in there. I don't know if we would really have separate bullet or maybe whatever differentiation, like how they're gonna really, because that's another issue where we have the multilingual learners, we wanna know how are they going to meet. So that's a broader thing. I know, because I've done this
scope and sequence. It's so nice if they like are like, okay, here's my like scope and sequence.
Yes.
I would just say like as a broad thing, like here it is. This is what it's gonna look like. This is what we're doing. This. I really like that. And then I know in writing, on the first bullet, handwriting falls into that. But sometimes they overlook like the process of handwriting. Like how do we hold the pencil? How do we sit? How do we just the basics.
So I think we do have scope and sequence in the rubric, but it absolutely can be part of the criteria as well. Phonics typically involves encoding and decoding, but we can spell that out for them, that we need them to specifically outline the encoding piece of phonics first, the spelling piece. And then, yes, that multilingual part is a great, Scott and I discussed that too, about where does that fall? Should it be its own bullet? Because looking at our data, if you remember way back when we also looked at data, that was a need in our district as well that needs to be addressed. So originally we kind of thought it fell under how the program addresses differentiation, but adding it as a separate bullet could be very helpful as well.
Would you consider adding special education in there too? Or would you just count that as what's the differentiation? That was a subgroup I thought of, and sometimes they do have specific.
Yeah, I like that. Because going along with that, if you look at the PACE program, they're developing their own curriculum in there because publishers are not really, there's a specific need that is not being met that should be. So if we find a publisher that can meet that need and help the struggling students, especially if they have autism or all this.
So I have to add as a separate bullet, special education. Maybe, do you think combining special ed and then multilingual learners in one bullet, or should we keep those as two separate components?
I don't think they're the same.
No, they're different, but
I just wondered if they could even just be underneath that differentiation piece, right?
Okay,
If
Yep.
that would be make sure you hit
these two subgroups.
Yeah, just to make sure they tell us what they do for those two groups.
Got it.
Do we want to add anything there about background knowledge? I know it's probably in the rubric. Does it need to be part of the criteria of making sure that we have that part of it?
Yes. We need background knowledge.
I would like it in there. Yeah. But I don't know.
background knowledge is.
Can you?
So like some kids won't know things yet. So like if I talked about,
Relays.
like
We had a math problem about relays.
a relay race. Some kids have no
They
idea what a
didn't know
relay
what a
race
relay
is.
Oh, okay.
So then it like builds the knowledge about what is that before you're even reading about it.
Yeah.
So really in kindergarten, we have background knowledge for everything. You know what I mean? Like this is a refrigerator, this is a stove, this is the, like you do everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we need that.
And along those lines, how valuable would it be to call out connection, cross-curricular connection, like support for other areas? For example, how does it dovetail with the science or the history or the whatever, just as an explanatory piece?
What, can I ask a third question about, because some of these, I think it would be helpful to have them
So I know sometimes there are things that come into play in instruction that sometimes we're not aware of. For example, critical race theory is illegal in Idaho, right? But sometimes an instruction is put in there. So is this something that we put it in the criteria or in the rubrics afterwards?
I don't see how that would come into play in this kind of instruction. Like, like, there's barely room to fit in this. I'm not sure how. Like,
I'm
I'm
just
not
wondering
sure
where
where
it
you
fits.
would see that even.
Well, it was in those two curriculums that we looked at, because it said all throughout it, like, we have SELs intertwined throughout this curriculum, like they were talking
Social
about.
emotional.
So are we
Yeah,
looking
but
for
that's-
SEL or
that's
critical
different.
race theory?
Critical race theory would be a more advanced thing, like more college level, I would think, where SEL is more of a beginning, trickle down.
I think
Okay,
we
so
really need
let's-
to remember it's a reading curriculum.
Right.
So I already have an SEL curriculum. And I don't have time to add anything else into my reading.
My
I think
daughter
that's-
SEL, sorry.
No.
My daughter SEL, she learns how to work in group settings, or she learns how to she earned an award for having self-control, so it's not necessarily like what, I hear what you're saying, because there's many schools that do that kind of hidden thing, but I personally haven't seen it in the Nampa School District. At least in like, yeah, like, but then again, her teacher's here and
Yeah, choose your words wisely.
this teacher
Is a Different things and monologue.
The yes, no, yes,
Oh,
no,
so
and then
you would
determine when
just
to
say, oh, so yes or no. So each of these little categories would either be a yes or a no, but then you're just adding up how many yeses it has.
Yeah.
But if all of these sections have a different amount, how do you get a score then without an average?
And then are we doing it where, because in the screening committee, you had different people look at different sections. In the adoption committee, everybody looked at the whole thing. So in third grade, they're not necessarily going to have.
We're gonna talk about that too. So that does come up, right?
Okay.
So we are going to have to score, our knowledge is going to have to be, because phonological awareness is in kindergarten through second grade. But you all have to score every program. So you're gonna have to score a program on phonological awareness, which means you can't just look at third through fifth grade. So here's two possible options. Again, option 3, whatever you come up with is available. Oh, I think I have that. Or, there we go, there's the or. So either you're in a group that you're looking at kinder and third, you're looking at first and fourth, or you're looking at second and fifth, or we could have just all of you be in 2 groups and you look at kinder, second and fourth, or you look at first, third, and fifth. Of course, again, you're open to look at whatever grade levels you want, but we really need you to be an expert on these things.
I think this is a great opportunity to insert, remind everybody, you don't score the rubric till the very end. So you have the presentation, you're taking notes. You got the rubric in front of you, you have your notebook in front of you. You can come and thumb through the material as much as possible. You can take samples home. You're taking all your notes, you're having conversations, you're building all your knowledge about this resource. And then the very last thing we do is everybody individually scores the rubric. All conversation is done. All evidence evaluation is done. Like, you've now spent enough time to get an idea that where is this at in regards to this. So I think if we were just saying, you have 20 minutes, here it is, then we maybe would need a much more detailed rubric so everybody's on the same page. This is more about at the very end of the process, instead of just presenting and advising the board with qualitative information, we also want to put a quantitative ranking through somewhat of a scoring system to it as well. So, and then what that does for us is it also not only puts an overall ranking, it also advises people on which of those components, where the ranking was strong and where the ranking was weak. So like Trustee Valley and his fellow trustees are probably gonna wanna look at some of that stuff, right? Like so you're ranked number 2, you got a good solid score, but what within those other components, like where were you strong and where were you weak, so to speak? But that gives a quantitative picture, and then also we'll have those qualitative descriptors that go with it. So keeping in mind where the rubric finally plays its role as a scoring tool is right at the very, very, very end. It is not up front when you're working through evidence gathering. So thank you for letting me interrupt again.
And so we would be doing multiple rubrics in one evening and having to.
Yes.
Well, you're taking notes during presentation and like capturing what you're hearing, but you're not scoring until that last
So
meeting.
at one meeting, we're gonna be sitting down with 12.
Up to 4.
4 of these.
Up to
and
4,
scoring
yes.
them along with our notes that we've taken. Which means we have to have really good So it's not like before when we were taking it home and we were filling out the thing and sending it to you where we had it to look at right there.
You can still, you'll have access to these at home. You can take notes, whatever you want to do, but you won't actually score until that last meeting.
But you can already come prepare with the score because you've already done your homework and you know what the questions are gonna be. So I'm gonna come here and just.
Right. Or come with your questions for the committee. This is kind of what I was thinking. This is what I'm seeing. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts
once
on this?
everything's
Have
done.
a good discussion like we've done. So back to scoring thoughts, and we can circle back to this decision as well.
We're doing a lot of circling back. We start making some decisions.
Well, we've
I know,
fleshed out the
I'm just
criteria.
giving you a hard time. You're doing an excellent job. Keep it up.
It's good conversation. We need to have it.
Yeah. So, scoring each section, like Scott said, we do need to have a quantifiable score. So if we did, I mean, if these were a yes or no just for you, but then you still had to give like a peer the whole section a score, would that work? Or are you in favor of scoring each one and doing the average?
I don't love averaging for something like this.
Well,
Because I feel like it will lose some of the, like they could be high in a few, but then not have all 44 sounds, right? Well, that's not.
Right,
Well-
so then it weights those all equally also, where some of these within here might not be
Yeah.
equally weighted.
So
That's
I like-
true.
I like the idea of like a yes, no, kind of within, and then an overall score.
What do you guys think about that?
Yeah. So let me make sure I'm understanding. So it would be the same score for each category, basically, each overall criteria. But within the criteria, we have the yes, no, these are the criteria that we're looking for to see whether or not how they score on the 1 to 5 scale for that category?
No.
No? Okay.
I think the
Because-
yes or no is like, did it, so under phonics, for example, does it have all 44 sounds clearly outlined in a scope or sequence, yes or no?
Right.
And then after you've scored all of these yes or no, then you're going to review that and give phonics a score of 1 to 5 based on these defined scoring.
Right, but what if they have yes to everything, but they don't have the 44 sounds? That seems like an automatic disqualification. But if you're supposed to just give them, they're 6 out of 7, that doesn't
No, but I think
reflect that.
based on how you like
Mhm.
looked at each area, then you choose from the scoring, the
Okay.
defined scoring, like, okay, they were yes to most, but they didn't have decoding and encoding together,
Okay.
and they also didn't have the 44 sounds, like,
Okay,
it was partially met, right?
okay,
That's what I
Do
was
you see what you're
picturing,
saying?
Okay.
that you kind of look at all of your notes to see at the end then, like, how do I feel like it fits
Okay.
this bottom piece?
I think if you're not gonna average, you're not gonna score each component and average it, right? Then basically, whatever your overall component score is kind of an executive decision that you're gonna have to make. Like, there's not gonna be a direct quantifiable tie from what you did down below to what you're gonna give it up above. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if there's a way we can get there.
but I think it is helpful when telling the narrative afterwards to say, oh, well, it's because they missed this big thing. It's nice to have that on paper.
That qualitative notes with it.
Right, so whether you have yes, nos, whether you have 1, 2, 3, knowing that the overall component score is 5, and that's often an executive decision, in other words, you're not doing math, but just get some way to track strengths and weaknesses with each individual component. Yes, like that is, but understand that unless you're gonna average, I don't know how else the overall component score is gonna be an executive decision. You're just gonna have to say,
Yeah.
from everything I'm seeing, that's a 4.
But I do agree, if we do average, then we're gonna have to go through and make sure that they're all equal. or we're gonna weight within each category.
Right.
Things differently, because there are things on here that definitely aren't equal.
Well, I just think too, for the parents that don't see what I teach every day, or for me, I don't teach fifth grade every day, you know what I mean? So for me, it'll be helpful to be like, okay, yeah, in my fifth grade, I'm looking for this exactly. You know what I mean? Because when I say phonemic awareness, I'm sure Marco's like, what is she talking about? Like, what exactly in phonemic awareness is she talking about? I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this. You know what I mean? So if we make it pretty like black and white, so like you guys as parents know like, oh, this is what they're saying. Is there any way we can get from this?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think
A
that
little
would be
more
very
homework.
helpful. So
A little more reading.
This is, let's say curriculum evaluation guidelines. You're just right here, mine's like in here.
But I would also say that if they did their reading in our, if you remember back to just learning how to read, that literature that we read, all of those things
Are in there.
are in there.
I feel like they're just more defined when you look like here. You know what I mean? Like, so for example, like it just says word recognition, like there's some red flags. Like if I see this, a 3 cueing system, directing students to use picture cards, context clues, attend to the first letter of a word as a clue. If that's in there, that's a red flag to us. This is not a good curriculum right now for us.
But they don't know what the 3 cueing system is.
Yeah.
So that is teacher language.
That's true. But like explicit instruction.
Right, which
Yeah, that's
Which
true.
is why I was suggesting that qualitative description, or I know it's gonna be
I just don't
forever.
think that even building their background knowledge to be able to understand a rubric with those within these components is feasible.
Those take too much time.
Yeah, it's just, it's nice to, because especially if you have something that's like right on the edge.
But some of these,
But-
I mean, like you could just pop the same thing into each one of those.
That's
and
true.
tweak it, like,
Yeah, just tweak it a little bit, but, okay, never mind.
So, really quickly, there's this one that has a lot more information than this.
oh, so what this is, let me explain. So what this is just to help us decide how we wanted to score. So I just gave an example of
Okay, good.
2 of the sections of what it would look like. But this would be what, like, all of the sections would look like, this, the whole rubric would look like.
I guess that's what you guys decided first.
And this is what we're gonna tweak tonight. But yes, this is like our starting point.
And if
No, great question.
if in the note section, or, I mean, there would need to be a note section, but if it was like this instead, and you had the component here, notes, and then your explanation for why, so if there was a glaring lack of something, yes, I rated it this, however, the big hole that it has is this, and you had it, there's a spot for us to write those important things in there. Not necessarily in the note section, because that's gonna be taken up with other thoughts, but if there's a section to write
Then
those concerns or whatever, or reasoning for the scoring.
Right,
And
justification.
that would be part of the information we're trying to elicit for the qualitative description.
Right.
So it can go right on the rubric, yes.
Yeah.
Because then you'll remember it.
Right, so if we have the components broken out, the actual details of what we're looking for, and we have yes, no, and then we have an executive decision overall score for the section, and then we have a scoring justification, does that mean everything that we would need?
I like that personally. It's not my idea.
Yeah, I like that.
Because then we can formally,
Can you repeat that again, please?
Oh, so, yeah, okay, so if you look at that second example here, so these would be a way for you to keep track of the parts of this overall criteria that's in bold. And you'd say, yeah, it does all these things except this one. And so you would assign it a score based on the score down at the bottom, the 1 through 5 scale, overall for that entire section. But for example, if this second one, the phonics one here, does everything except it doesn't cover all of the sounds. and you, even though on paper it looks like, oh, they have most of the stuff, but you scored it a 1 or a 2 because it didn't meet that big glaring hole, then you could explain why, even though it looks like it has all these things, it was only a 2 because this was really, really important. They missed this big bucket. So you have the yes, no to help you figure out how you want to score it. You score it and then you explain why you did that.
Okay. Motion to add those notes.
Motion to approve this, sorry.
So then that brings us to how are we going to come up with the final composite score for each of these criteria? So here's an example, number 1 at the top. So we have, there's 9 overall categories here. And we randomly put some numbers in here. Example 2 has them weighted all equally. Each of the areas weighted equally, except for it obviously has to add up to 100. So one of the categories needed to be weighted more. But it is whatever you decide. So maybe I'm getting my head of myself, but so whatever you want the weight to be, it just needs to equal 100. So knowing that, I think we were actually going to work through just knowing that that's what we're going to land on.
Okay.
Eventually, we're going to score each of those areas. We talked through that already. So we're up to then, before we decide how we're weighting each of those areas, adding SEL to our rubric. And this is where I'm handing it off to you.
Let's verify that the rest of the rubric is
Okay,
doable.
okay.
Well, I guess a question, are we using the criteria? Are we creating a rubric based on the criteria that we're handing the publishers? And then we are assessing how well they meet those criteria?
Criteria
Or,
is about giving them the opportunity to join this process, and it's their opportunity to show us that they meet those bare minimums that we need.
okay,
Okay, then the rubric itself is thinking like this is post. This is once it's all said and done. So once they've done their presentations, everything else, that's, we're not envisioning that our rubric is gonna look a whole lot different than it did the first time through.
okay,
We're just adding some arithmetic to it,
okay.
okay? And then that lens of just, teasing out what, how do we separate and rank these publishers? Okay.
Okay,
And then, so like Tammy talked about, we do think, that social emotional learning is something that we probably need to add to the rubric and have some of those descriptors that we talked about. Here's some things that, we don't want to see. And if we don't see them, you're going to get a 5. And if we see it maybe just a little bit, it's a 3. And I'm just seeing a lot of it, you know what I'm saying? But before we get into that, to start listing some of those descriptors, let's make sure that the literacy components that we had on our previous rubric are still what we want on the new rubric, even though we're adding some numbers to it. Okay, so let's do that first.
Okay.
Tammy, on the rubric, I liked how, where it says avoid, that was turned into a positive statement and listed on there.
Yeah.
I really like that, just in your example here, if it would be possible to do that with some of the other avoids.
Yeah, I think it's gonna have to be done because you decided to go with what we're leaning towards is doing the yes or no for each of the components. So if that is what the final decision is, then yes, all of those avoids would be combined into other statements, like, for example, how it was done on example 1 and 2.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So is the conversation now the weight that we would give the different
No,
parts?
I think we're is there anything on here, just this itself without SEL? without any of the weights, is there anything literacy-wise we're missing?
And a question, so last time when we did this exercise with the same rubric for each grade level, there were some components that were challenging to score because they didn't apply to certain grade levels. Are we going to differentiate the rubric based on the grade level?
No, because now you're going to you're gonna be able to score them all because you're either gonna have to be kinder and third,
Okay,
you're either gonna have to be first and fourth, or you're gonna be second and fifth, or you're gonna be K 2, 4, 1, 3, 5. So you will be
okay,
having to score all of them and you'll have to make sure you can do that based on whatever grade levels you decide.
but then is it one rubric for each set of grades that we're doing? Or is it one rubric for kinder, one
No,
rubric
it will
for?
be just one rubric for the whole
For the whole
publisher, for the whole
okay.
program.
Okay.
It won't be a grade level rubric.
Okay.
Good question. So is there anything that needs to be added or removed
Let's
on
just
the
start,
literacy components?
let's just start in order, right? So when we look at phonological awareness, like as a component that's gonna get an overall score, are there other descriptors below it that we think we need to add in order to make our
So,
judgment of that component?
so maybe this is muddying the waters a little bit, but going back to the criteria and talking about the teacher-friendly way that technology and other materials are integrated into the curriculum, that came out as either a benefit or a drawback in our last discussions. Do we need to incorporate any of that? So how connected it is, whether all the materials are in the same place in order to teach this effectively? You know what I'm talking about?
I think that'll come in like there's kind of a section for that on
Okay.
there, I think.
Okay.
So anything specific to phonological awareness?
Do we need anything about daily, too detailed?
I like that idea, but I refer to our kinder teacher.
Yeah, I think it does need to say daily, but it says are there frequent opportunities, so kind of. So I wonder if we just change the wording a little bit.
To just say daily instead of.
Yeah,
Oh, there is this one time.
Yeah.
Or weekly.
well, and I just want to be
Yeah,
as
regular.
specific
Yeah.
as possible for you guys that don't teach this every day. So like right now for science of reading, the way the sounds are made in the mouth, very important. Like, do they show that? Are there flashcards or are there videos? Is there some way, so if the teacher is not doing it and they can't see the teacher's mouth, is there another way for them to get that? So I don't know if we want to add I don't know if we'd add another box with that in there. And then like when it says,
What are you envisioning there?
well, I really wanted to talk about, includes conversations about the way the sounds are made in the mouth.
It's almost like a technological piece, right?
Well, it can be technology or it could be flashcards, because some of the
Flashcards.
companies do like a flashcard with a picture of a mouth.
Yeah.
And then some of the companies, will do like a little video that the kids can watch, so they can get that practice. So I really think that needs to be in there, especially because that's huge in science of reading. Another thing is I really think we need to define sound and wordplay. So maybe in parentheses, maybe do the syllable, rhyme, onset and rhyme. Like these are what I'm looking for. Is that too specific? I don't know. Cause I can keep going.
No, I think, so,
Somebody just
I
don't
respect it.
Right?
No, I think it's really important to be specific in this
Yeah.
particular, in this
Yeah.
specific
So
context.
then the other one, again, science of reading, would be this instructional focus on attuning students to all phonemes of the word. So I want them to play with the first sound I need to play the middle sound, I need to play the last sound.
So that's why it's good to have you here.
So like
Yes.
that is all things that we really need to see. And I know that some of the curriculums we may see it's gonna be lacking. But I don't know how specific we wanna get.
You can just list
Yes,
those,
if-
right?
Yep,
Like,
I
are there
usually list
daily
them.
opportunities for phonemic awareness,
Yep.
including rhyme, onset and rhyme, beginning,
Yep.
middle, ending.
Initial, medial, final,
Segmentation.
yep,
That's
segmentation,
center.
blending.
That's an easy.
Yep.
Mhm.
What about the phonics section?
I would love something about decodable readers added.
Yeah. And I know that the last groups who came in made a big deal of the cursive.
That will come under, that's under writing, I believe. Actually, it's under somewhere.
It's handwriting. When you're talking decodable,
Yeah,
you're
where
talking
is
about
phonics?
the.
Oh,
Phonics,
it's
yes,
under
yes.
phonics. Oh,
Do you
okay.
wanna define that?
You wanna
I know that
define?
When I had my own girls, having them come home with those phonics decodables was huge.
Yeah, I think my only thought would be that maybe that's just a subset because we could print them, right? Like that's what we've been doing. So, that if it's not, like a tear out situation, is it a printable, like, is there just a way for us
Is
to
there a
make
way to
copies
do
of
it?
a
Whether it's,
decodable?
yeah, whether they come in the books and we tear them out and fold them in
Yeah.
staple them.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, targeted decodable practice,
Got it.
able to be taken home.
Got cursive. Anything else?
When it comes to handwriting, we're not talking about cursive, are we? Is that like gone?
no, just we do it in third grade.
Oh, you mean, okay, I didn't know.
I'm almost wondering though, if it goes, because this handwriting is under phonics only because it's multisensory. You should be hearing it, writing it, spelling it, all of those things when you're learning the letter, but cursive is not taught under phonics. So I'm wondering if that's a difference.
Yeah,
Cursive maybe should be under writing
yeah.
rather than phonics here.
But here with the handwriting explicitly taught with the letter formation, posturing, grip, that's very much a sensory motor thing. Does that, so I hear what you're saying with the writing, the sounds that you're hearing, but the mechanics of the writing, does that need to go somewhere else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost sounds like it does.
You mean move that whole, the reason why this is under here is only because research has shown that, like, when you're teaching phonics, the best thing you can do is first let them hear it. You're doing phonological awareness, then you're saying, here's the sound, this is how it's
Right.
spelled. And then you're blending some words with that sound.
Right.
And then they're going to their seats and they're actually writing words with that sound. And they're start at the top, go down, come back to the line and circle.
Oh,
This is a
okay.
B, what sound? But
Okay.
so, but it doesn't have to be here where it is on the rubric, doesn't matter.
Right, no, but I mean, I think for the phonics part, the connection between seeing, hearing, and writing it all together, that connects to me. But the actual mechanics part of things seems to dovetail with the other cursive that's also a mechanics thing.
Right, so
if that
they
makes-
only do it here, talking
Okay.
about formation, just because we want perfect practice.
Okay.
If kids are just randomly drawing a letter, not really forming them correctly, then they learn it incorrectly.
I'm good, it was just helping me understand. Thank you.
No, you're so welcome. Anything else for the phonics section?
I don't know if we wanna put on there the segmenting and blending are taught explicitly.
Oh, because that did come up last time. I think it's worth noting
Especially
it.
for the parents, so they know that we're looking for both segmenting and blending, so not just one.
In phonics or in phonological awareness? How does that look in phonics? I don't know what you mean.
Well, because we wanted, last time, we just needed to
Because
make
like
sure
in
that
our
there was.
practices, the language science reading, it says segmenting, blending are taught explicitly, practice regularly in both decoding and encoding.
So like,
But that
I
would
see
be
what
like
you're
what's,
saying, though.
but I think you're talking about cat. What sounds do you hear in
Yes.
cat? Act. Write the first sound you hear, cat. That's what that's talking about, right?
Yes.
okay,
Yeah, also with the, like a blending board
Yeah.
where you see the word cat and they're like, act. Cause that's gonna be more in phonics than it is gonna be in phonemic awareness where I'm just playing, tell me the sound of cat.
right, it won't be, yeah, those letters won't be there at all. So,
And I
and
noticed
that's,
when we saw some of the programs, they were missing
Yeah.
those things.
yeah, so I guess in my mind, I'm thinking that goes in encoding, like my brain just goes there, that that's part
So
of,
then
that's how you
maybe-
teach
Would
spelling.
it be helpful if we like define encoding?
Yeah.
Define
Besides
decoding?
spelling, but so you're gonna know that,
So we could just put maybe two, make that box into two, so one of them being decoding, reading,
And
then,
then
like,
say
put an
like blending
example.
board,
and then the
Yeah,
next
because there were
box
some of them that
being
didn't even have a blending board.
none.
or they only
Or
have
it was like
8 words.
3 or 4 words, and that was it.
do we want to add daily then in this section?
Love it.
I hope so.
Narrow it down, what, daily blending boards?
It doesn't have to be daily though, weekly.
But you're doing, well,
Like I break it out into, cause like my blending board now is huge, so I chunk it like a little bit on this day.
But you do it daily,
yeah, it's a practice that needs to be done daily.
right,
Well, I mean, and because remember, we're quantifying this.
right,
So if the expectation of a 5 is what, like Utopia, then you can say daily. If it doesn't quite meet the expectation of
Yeah.
daily, but it's still really strong, then then it's not a 5, right? It's a 4. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's just
Right.
It's not a 5.
And then
So,
Well, and
Sorry.
if there's enough words too, then you can easily, section it to make it fit.
right,
But
and
if
then-
there's only like 3 or 4 words, that's not gonna get me through what I need.
And then if we're splitting that, the decoding and the encoding into separate boxes, right now it talks about them being taught in tandem.
Yes. So
How-
they do need to be taught in tandem, that's
So-
the thing.
Right,
So I don't know about splitting it, or if you wanna do that and then put a decoding box and then do an encoding, I don't know.
so we could do it 3. So one for do they do this, do they do that, and then do they do them together? Because they may do them, but separately throughout the curriculum, right?
I'm capturing this. Okay, got it. Are we ready to talk fluency?
What does automaticity mean?
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, it's an automatic thing.
Automatic?
Mostly when we think of that, there's national norms for how many like words per minute students should be able to read. So there's studies done and there's nationally normed scores that we would include you. We would consider you to be an automatic reader if you were reading at the 50 percentile rate. And then there's scores like for letter sounds and letter names. So even at kinder, we can determine if you are reading at automaticity, which would be at the 50th percentile of those norm scores.
Going back to phonics. Did you put about the decodable phonics skill or practice by applying letter sound knowledge and decodable text that match the phonemic awareness top?
Yep,
You put that?
I put,
You're so good, just prop
well-
it in here.
well, I'm a first grade teacher at heart, you know, that's where I spent most of my years.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, now I'm ready to move on, sorry.
So how, I'm trying to figure out how to ask the question I want to ask about the fluency.
Mhm.
So fluency, I'm glad it says avoid the timed fluency assessments. Is there any, so I know fluency is divorced from comprehension, but comprehension, do we have something else for comprehension later? Oh yeah, comprehension's later.
But I think we still do time reading.
Yeah,
It's just that automaticity, not just how fast they can.
right,
That's,
right.
wanna know that they're accurate in their reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Well, part of what tells you if they're accurate in their reading is if they're robot reading or if they're reading with prosody and
yeah,
And that's how we define, that's how fluency is defined.
right,
There's three prongs, there's accuracy, rate, and then prosody.
right. And so do we want to call that out anywhere that says that it emphasizes the prosody over the time? I don't know.
So timing is actually important, and it is part of the IRI, because if you never actually get to reading at that rate, you are never gonna be able to keep up with the amount of reading that you have to do later.
That's true.
And so the goal is to get kids to that 50%. We don't want to be speed reading by any means, which is why that middle of the road score is what we shoot for. But it is a very important piece.
Okay, ready?
Ready? Go.
Okay, here we go. Letter names and sounds are given sufficient opportunities for practice with feedback.
In vocabulary?
No, in fluency.
Oh.
So.
I thought you were moving on.
No.
Oh.
Oh, Tammy, no. Yep, if we're gonna do this, if you measure score like this, everybody needs to know, letter names and sounds also need to be practiced fluently, not just text, okay? I got that one. Then make sure we have word level fluency practice available also. So just at the word level also, and then at the text level.
you're talking like sight words.
Yes. Yeah, like sight words or even like CBC words. Or words with blends, or like first grade, you know. You know what I'm saying?
Would you do that in fluency though, or you would be doing that in, like I'm picturing, we would be doing that in phonics?
We would do it in fluency if we're timing it. So like for letter names and letter sounds, it would be part of our fluency.
Right, which I assume, like I guess I assume that's what fluency is in kinder, but I mean,
And then for
First
first
through-
grade, they do letter sound, or they do words, like a word fluency, where they how many words can
Up
they be.
until January-ish, it switches to
So they do letter sounds, that
Short
just a lot of
passages.
words. In kindergarten, we do a letter, or a word fluency also, where how many words can you read?
So I have letter names and sounds, I have word level, and then I have text level.
Text level, yep,
can
love
those,
it.
can those just be like one in parentheses with the,
And then are we gonna have, a separate section on like multi-language? There is. Okay, so we won't do that till we get there.
Right.
All right.
Alrighty. Vocabulary. So tier 2 words, is that in our definition? Yes. So we do have a glossary in the back of our rubric. And we went through the glossary with our original committee. So tier 2 words are the words that are highly frequent in written text, but not necessarily in our oral language, like are gracious or beneficial or required or maintain. Those would be considered tier 2 words. Tier 1 words are like hello or mom, dad, those would be tier 1. And then tier 3 are those like subject level words.
That's what she's talking about.
Yeah, so in vocabulary where it says are tier 2 words taught explicitly, that's what that means.
My only question would be if we could add a repeatedly in that first box.
Mhm.
Are they
Explicitly and
explicitly
repeatedly.
taught and students are given opportunities to use them repeatedly in their speech, see them or wherever that goes, but just that it's not you see it one time and then we're done with it, right? Like we wanna keep coming back to the same words all week or the whole time.
Okay, got it. Anything else for that section?
Do we need to put something about like just the robust teacher to student conversations with the vocabulary words? Or do we feel like that taught explicitly, more opportunities with that?
Well, how would that come out in the curriculum? If we're talking about conversations with the.
So like, at first the teacher would teach the word and then the kids would like practice using that word together or doing something with that word. So it's not just the teacher like, here's your vocabulary word and blah, blah, blah. And then the kids just go and then we move on.
Okay.
Because some people will do that. They won't really add any, almost that background knowledge that they need.
What we have with Journeys is each vocabulary word has its own card, and so it's used in a sentence, and on the back it has the definition, and that has 2 different activities that they can discuss, talk about it, and something else.
Okay.
So it has built-in activities on that card for that word for them to do to practice using that word. Plus, there's other things.
So it's more than just the teacher saying this to them, but actually having the students do things with it.
I think that's kind of hit in the first one.
You think it is?
Yeah.
To use them in their, especially like if you do add that repeated, right, to use them in their speech repeatedly see them in print, repeatedly use them in their writing, that kind of.
What about comprehension?
Okay, so just for my understanding, the read aloud opportunities are teacher-led or these are student-led?
No,
the
teacher-led.
Teacher-led, okay, above grade level, okay.
Meaning separate from like a reader.
So do we want to put like defining what kind of text, like decodable text, level text, predictable text? Or do we just wanna, we don't really say like what comes, you know?
I think where we say feature variety of text, that might cover it, because I actually don't, with decodable text, if it's written well, is not going to benefit comprehension.
Yeah, true.
So I wouldn't want to put decodable text in this section at all.
Okay.
Or predictable text either.
And so for the comprehension of the writing for me should, in theory, dovetail. So, for maybe, it has different text structures, as in cause, effect, problem, solution, chronological sequence, etc. But, granted, big caveat, coming with a slightly different lens here. What about genres? Is it important to call out that they can understand text structure of various genres, not just, so this is how poetry differs from prose, this is how literature or a literary, nonfiction, how deep do you get in elementary on those types of things?
I think because depending on the text structure, they lend themselves either to literature work or nonfiction work. Some of them cross over, but some do not. And so depending on what genre, like up here where we say has a variety of text and literature and fiction, or an expository, which is nonfiction, expository text. But I'm fine if you want to define text structures by text type.
No, I mean, would it be beneficial? Should we add an additional one? Because these types of text structures, the cause effect, the rhetorical construction is different from the textual construction.
Sure, and maybe 4th and 5th grade start out a little bit, but not
Okay.
You could just add one more that just says our different text types,
Yeah.
and then like in parentheses, put poems.
Okay.
Like kind of maybe just list that.
It stays a little more in the informational text, literature text. Like, it doesn't get a lot deeper or broken down more than that through 5th grade.
Every once in a while, they'll throw in a poem.
But being able to identify that as a poem, so to speak, it's more about just knowing what are the different components of information we're trying to pull out of literature compared to the different components of information we're trying to pull out of informational text. It's kind of what we're working on at that level.
Thank you.
Could we split the read aloud and the text reading opportunities?
Yeah.
Just into 2 boxes, like
So I got a question. So the publishers get to pick what books the kids read that follow this guidelines or whatever, right?
what do you mean?
The publishers are the one that picks the literature.
Yes.
So is there something in there, because we want to make sure they're school approved texts as well. Is this something that we send them our policy so that they know what we're looking for?
So, I'm sorry, I'm confused a little bit.
Mhm.
So when you say school approved texts, we're approving the text in this process, correct?
Right.
So by definition, what we approve is school approved,
Will
right?
be,
Or
will
will
be.
be.
Will be.
So how are you
Well,
defining
there's
that
2
then?
different ways to look at it. You can just send them information so they can do the homework for us, or they can just tell us what they have, and then we have to do the homework and make sure it's school approved. So I'd rather they do the homework for us and say, okay, this meets the criteria with regards to the policy that you have set.
So
That's what I'm thinking.
I think that's what, and I could be way off.
Mhm.
Like when we send them our rubric
Mhm.
and they then share back with us how it meets that, we are gonna have to do the hard work to then decide if what they put on this
Why can't we
paper.
have them do the hard work?
Well, they will, but then we have to be good consumers of what they're telling us also.
But I'm just saying, we're paying thousands and thousands of dollars. They will do the work because they want the money.
Oh, they have, but like, for example, we're gonna have to define these things. I think when we define like SEL, for example, all of the programs that we've went through, if we would have asked them, like, do you have CRT represented in your work? All of them would 1,000% say no. But that's not how you're interpreting it. So when I say we have to be good consumers and understand, like, we're talking the same language. When we ask you to explain X, Y, and Z, and you're telling us this, are we talking the same language? Like, we have to make sure we are talking the same language, that what we're asking them to tell us what they have and don't have is exactly what they're saying. If I'm making any sense.
Yeah, you are.
I don't know.
You are. It's more work, and there's a lot of work that goes into this, so I get it. It's good for everybody here to understand what school policy is and to make sure that we don't get, again, put into place.
Absolutely.
How many of those books that the trustees pulled, like how many of them are K-5 though? Aren't they older?
I don't know.
I think all the questions.
The thing is, I don't wanna be surprised. I just don't wanna be surprised.
And a lot of this, Marco, is like a textbook, so they will take a sample from a reading, an actual novel. And it's in the textbook, so they either have it there or they don't, there's nothing we can do, we just say no, if they have something in there we don't want. But we kind of have to look, or they can tell us if we are specific enough, they can tell us, yes, this is.
By and large, they're not gonna go tear out pages 44
Right.
through 48 because we didn't like that story.
Right.
We're just gonna have to wait whether that
Look and
story
see
fits
if it's-
within what we're
Right.
gonna adopt or whether it's
Yeah.
not, right?
I do remember when we had, some curriculum we had some presentations before that the board went and listened to probably 8 months ago. They were willing to change some of the things that we were concerned about. So I don't know if some.
Well, and not to get us too far off topic of building the rubric here, but depending on the content and the publisher and how they're designed, like if you're very digital heavy,
Yeah.
it's much easier to mix and move components that you license and particularly purchase. For a K-5 adoption, so much of what we're adopting needs to be in the hands of the kids, is that you can't, there's less flexibility on what can be swapped in or swapped out of the package, so to speak. So like K-5 ELA tends to be a little more, I'll use the old term of textbook. They call them readers notebooks, they call them students notebooks, whatever they call it. Tends to be a little more, textbook in nature, so to speak. It's a little harder.
What Jan's saying, it came up in our last curriculum session thing, was that one of the gentlemen did not like one of the stories in there. And he explained it to me afterwards. I don't know if he explained it to us or whatever. There was a Japanese boy who really wanted to play baseball, but it just talked about basically like.
His family was put into an internment camp, so he didn't have the opportunity. And he felt like that was really thrown at them
With no
without
explanation.
any background information. Yeah.
Which
We
again
do have to
supports
look
the
at
building
that.
background knowledge.
Yeah.
Right, that's why it's important to build background knowledge.
Which was something that I was gonna ask, because we've been doing it a lot, as prep for our SBAC test for the writing, we've been doing a lot of paired texts. So we would have one fiction, one nonfiction. So is that something we can put in here with the comprehension, is the paired text? So you have the nonfiction that gives you the background knowledge for we sort of have that a little bit, but that day 4 reading and journeys.
Yeah,
kind of
Journeys has a paired
sometimes-
text.
Yeah, so having a paired text that gives you that nonfiction background to go along with and give you more information about the fiction story, I think is a really good piece of that to give that to the kids. I don't know if it definitely needs to be in there, I just know that's, for me, that's a very valuable tool.
Once again, just as a facilitator, I agree. I mean, I've seen so many kids that it's the exposure to a story or a piece of text that wasn't the main hub that finally connected them to what we were trying to get them to learn, right? Like, not every child's gonna see the main piece of text you're using in that unit as engaging enough for them to connect the dots, wrestle them to connect. So the more paired texts that we can provide them to get them there is really important.
Right. And along those lines, the ability to articulate. So how much do they emphasize the ability to articulate and draw the connections between the background information presented and the stories? How did these translate and how do they connect to each other? How do they translate into the world around them?
You're talking about the whole text to text, text to self, text to world piece.
Yeah.
So I think when those 2 bullets that say to avoid kind of address what is being discussed. So when those are flipped into more statements. Instead of instruction that switches topics frequently, it'll be instruction that goes deeper into content so they can connect to
More
other
than one
subjects.
story though, but like a unit of.
Right, well, and then topics
Yeah.
or themes that are too broad or general to consistently connect knowledge and build domain-related vocabulary. So topics that go deep into content, so they can connect knowledge and build
Yeah.
domain-related vocabulary. So that second bullet can be flipped into that.
Yeah.
What about writing? So we have cursive already.
So, again, like I said, the connection, the part that I would really love to see in here, and of course, it's gonna be the older grades, the 4th, 5th, but the model text. So I know it has here in the first one, the gradual release, I do, we do, you do, but actually explicitly teaching text structure as a model for a text you're about to write. Does that make sense? Okay. So we're gonna read this personal narrative, and then you do a personal narrative.
Or I do.
Yeah, I do.
I
yeah.
do. And then we do, and then you do.
Right.
And if you do, is the writing connected to the theme? I feel like that's kind of the same thing, so maybe.
Right, that avoid bullet can help address that when it's rewritten.
Because then they have more background knowledge to use in their writing.
Correct. Yeah.
All right, what about assessment?
So, sorry, still in writing, question. How much peer editing and feedback and reading of each other's, sharing, publishing, all that stuff, how much of that happens at the elementary level?
A lot.
Should that be part of this writing component, the opportunities for publishing and peer and editing and?
I would just say that probably falls more into pedagogy than it does in curriculum resource.
Okay.
That's writing process.
And it's excellent pedagogy.
Okay.
But
Well, I mean, just like, I was just thinking, are there rubrics provided that go along with the writing that is, being, do they provide resources so that somebody doesn't have to just make it up?
We use the ISAT.
For your peer edits? Oh, nice, okay, never mind.
For your writing, Tim, you wanna put, like, writing is structured with models and graphic organizers. Because we don't really have graphic organizers in there.
Got it. Assessment?
Look at, we're almost to the end, people.
We aren't because
Circle us.
we actually aren't, we aren't.
I know,
I'm a little panicked
I'm
because we
so
have
proud
about
of
8
us.
minutes.
I'm so proud of us.
Well, let's stop for a minute. I mean,
I'm so proud of us.
we built the agenda at the start time and then a job to get done. And so we were hoping to keep it within 2 hours. It's not gonna keep it obviously within 2 hours. Is everybody able to stay till we get the job done? And the description or consequence being, if not, we gotta get another meeting on the books. We can't invite publishers till this is done. And and every day that we push our current schedule back, we're that much closer to not having things in the hands of our teachers in the fall. So just keep that in mind. But we do need to keep staying on topic and churning and yeah, we're making great progress, but
I don't know.
That's fine.
we can do that right now if you want real quick.
No.
Or no, go.
I already took my own phone number.
All right, here we go. Assessment.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo!
All right.
I've been talking a lot of assessment recently.
I was gonna make this an RP comment, but I kept it
Oh,
in.
thank you, thank you.
So they the first component explicitly calls out word recognition and comprehension. And it does have in the last component, a variety of assessments, but there's nothing that explicitly calls out the writing component in the assessment. So do assessments provide multiple data points to understand the student's ability to construct sentences, paragraphs, extended text?
The performance task
The
would,
performance task
would
Right.
cover that.
So
But
an
that's-
extended response.
Right, but that's, the style, so are these styles there, but what structures exist to evaluate the success of those?
Well, if that's one of their assessments, is a performance task, which we've been building ourselves because we don't have anything like that. Part of that is the whole process of reading through the sources, reading through this really convoluted prompt to then find way down here at the bottom what they're actually supposed to be writing about, because we're trying to make it mimic that ISAT test, which buries the prompt so far in there that the kids struggle to find it.
Yeah.
So that's what we have been doing is with those paired texts, give them the fiction, nonfiction, and then we have built this full long prompt. So it's comprehension is part of that, and finding what they're supposed to be writing about, and so all of that is kind of interwoven into that performance task.
So could we say, is composition writing assessed? Like just, is it in there? Like, is it in the performance task or like, is it in there?
Yeah, well, I guess I was thinking,
Sure.
I was thinking with an eye to remediation here you have good data to know exactly where kids are lacking in their oral, journey and their comprehension journey, but no good data to know this kid really, their language is beautiful, but their sentence construction sucks. Do you have discrete data points for that?
Are you thinking like
That
that?
comes in writing too.
Well, but also I think it pairs with the rubrics for these assessments. So I'm wondering if you, if there's something about the rubrics that correlate to the assessments, break out skills to differentiate instruction or something.
Okay.
I don't know, is that what you're?
Yeah.
Is that?
So would that be under the writing then?
I
Probably, like maybe something about, is there writing rubrics? And then like in parentheses, you could put sentence structure.
targeted rubrics to assess skill deficiencies in writing. You have here the differentiation, just in general for assessments here, but I don't know. I figured if we're targeting word recognition and comprehension, should we also target their fundamental? Yeah.
Yeah, I think,
Just
like for us,
Yeah.
when we ask if it's providing multiple data points on comprehension, really the only way to know if they're comprehending at a deep level is through their writing. Like that's how we assess it. It's not through a multiple choice test. That wouldn't be a high level.
No,
So I think we know that, but I think pointing it out.
Yeah.
So targeted rubrics to differentiate instruction and writing.
Yeah, specifically, we did have a rubric on here about teaching mechanics, but how do we know if we've hit the mark? How do we assess their skill in those areas?
Would we just add in when you're listing the variety of assessments? Could you even just list under their writing rubrics?
Yeah.
Rather than another, because I think it goes to a robust system of assessment.
Okay.
And do we want it to say, like assessments include screening, diagnostic, and progress monitoring? To make sure that they have all of those in there.
Yeah, I do.
I feel like the ones we have that.
I feel like we do have some other tools that we use for screening, like the IRI. And now that the state is requiring us to do K-5 dyslexic assessments as screeners. I feel like we have those, but we could definitely ask them for some.
And would that be a subset of the assessment for differentiation? Or something totally different?
No, I think it fits in the assessment components, like what are you providing for us that we can use to measure? There's nothing wrong with listing it once again as something that you have it, it's gonna help increase your score in that category, right? If you don't have it. Yeah, I think it'd be the first time any of us ever were exposed to one where we went, wow, that is an absolute comprehensive assessment package you have tied to your curriculum. Nice. I don't have to go look for anything else. That would be the first time ever in the history of.
Yeah, that's the whole report, the whole time I'm thinking, oh, this is gonna be amazing.
I know this.
But certainly.
I am rich.
Yeah, it's not out there.
I think having it in there is something we keep an eye on.
Yeah. All right, so I got that.
Okay.
That was a wish.
Are we on other?
Let's move to other.
I know you mentioned special education, so I just wonder if that could be next to differentiation. I don't know if it needs a whole other, but I think even if it could be a slash, it'd be great to have some connection and.
Right, and
Yes.
just for my edification, does Nampa have a GT program?
Yes, but it's,
The building level.
speak to it more, yeah, it's building level, but my department doesn't work with it, so I'm gonna, I don't know.
I would say
deeply about
GT
it.
services is a better description than
Okay.
GT program, so to
Okay.
speak. So we do start screening in second grade for possible identification. And then really, it's more
Gifted,
gifted and
talented.
talented. And then it's probably more where it would get programish, so to speak, at the middle school level.
Okay.
So it's.
Is that something as teachers or that you guys think would be worthwhile pursuing if we don't have something?
Well, and I was just asking because we were talking about differentiation. And so special education encompasses the kids who need the extra support because they have gaps or special needs that have them below their peers in whatever area they are. But it also encompasses the kids who are precocious and move ahead. And so that was the only reason I was asking.
And I would say that almost every single elementary GT kid I've run across, it's in the STEM world that engages them when we offer the extension. It's not in the literature world. So most of our offerings to them deal with building things and being very,
All my hopes and dreams of the artists and Shakespeare's out there, you know?
Yeah, we have those too. We have those. We even have an arts focus school.
Yep, absolutely.
Trish works at.
Are there some descriptions to the technology digital ecosystem we wanted to put down? We talked about some of it earlier in the criteria conversation, but
My biggest fear is that it's going to be technology heavy. And
so a possible.
something that's balanced, that's not.
So my thought was, so a descriptor could be a good balance of offline and online learning activities.
And
That's kind of the language that the profession's going to now, is just online, offline. But good balance is what you're saying.
yeah, and remind me, you guys use Power Schools as your LMS, right?
It's a record system, it's not an LMS.
Oh, okay.
Otis.
What do you have, Otis? But Otis just does, it's not a true LMS, it's just a skills.
No,
It's an LMS.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay, do we need to call out that it needs to play nice with the stuff we already have?
that's
Well-
kind of what we did.
Okay,
So our tech department checks to make sure that they meet with their tech people and determine if the systems
Okay.
speak
Yeah,
together.
our IT department takes care of that piece. We don't have to worry about that.
yes.
I think we did talk about adding a homeschool connection. Like what is the
Under the technology.
homeschool? Oh, I was just thinking of a
Oh, and
separate
others.
in general, because to me, a digital ecosystem is what I am working with in the kids. And then I was thinking that.
The parent portal or opportunities
Or
for,
like,
yeah.
are
News,
there?
parent letters.
Yeah. Here's what we're working on during this unit. Here's the,
Right.
so the opportunity for, whether it's shared via Parent Square or sent home, but just that homeschool connection.
Yep, I like that. Got it.
See, my kid's teacher already sends that out, so I'm like, oh yeah, it's already there. She must be.
I know. She's
She's also making this meeting go on.
Okay. And then do we need to call out any more details about multi-language learners?
Yeah, do we need to put some specifics?
Tell us.
All right, here we go. So just like. So for the multilingual learners, I'm sure you know where I'm pulling all this off of. Yeah, you do, okay. Once they decode the word accurately, are there descriptions, pictures, or gestures to help them to teach, confirm the meaning of the word?
Would that be in vocabulary though, or?
Well, I think it would be under multi-language learners, just because when I watch them present, they usually do it for your multi-language or for your EL kids, then they're like boom, 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 and they'll just hit it. Like a list of things, just the curriculum people. And a couple that we've had. Attention is paid to positive transfer of letters and sounds from their home language.
Yeah. How many languages do we have in our district?
Oh,
Well, I think the last number I heard was up to 13.
yeah.
Students coming from homes that speak 13 different languages.
We have, so
Wow.
we have 13 different native languages in the district. And, but it could be more than that. I think that was a fall thing. I'm honestly pulling that out of, my brain just went to that number, but I know it was in that neighborhood. So, yeah. And that continues to grow, not shrink, obviously.
Is there, and I know that the way our EL is working right now is that they are pushing in and working with the kids on writing. At least that's what we've been told in our building.
It varies by building.
So my question is, having curriculum that is tied to, that is following along with the same of what's happening in the classroom as like a pullout to support or front load and do that instead of having a program that's totally disconnected from whatever curriculum that we're teaching. That would be really nice. I mean, in our school, we have a push-in, she comes in and she assists in the writing because writing hits all these different components. But we've also had it where our ELL kids were pulled and they were given vocabulary words and front loading for what's going to be happening next week so that they are more prepared for the lessons for the coming week. And so I didn't know if, and I'm not remembering if we have seen that in some of the curriculum companies, that they've had a separate component that's an EL component that could be a pull-out piece.
I don't think I've seen any that necessarily like it's a standalone book. I think that like if that person had the teacher's edition that you had, because it like most of them have like the whole section on this is what you could do for the SEL kiddos, although a lot of times it's in the moment. Like if you're reading the book and the story all together, it's saying, teacher, if you have kids that need this support, do this right now type thing. So it wouldn't make sense to have it done at a separate time anyway. But to reinforce it, but I think if they had access to like a digital and they knew you were on lesson 3, you know, I don't know, does that? are you wanting a separate, are you thinking we should ask if they have a separate program? Or like a support guide, or what are you
Or
thinking?
maybe just something about building background knowledge for your ELs.
Before we get to the story about bats, and they get, the week before, they get some vocabulary words and they get some background knowledge, so that when we get into that story and we're talking about that.
So if your support person had access and knew that you were doing lesson 3 next week, and you said, look at lesson 3 this week and pre-teach these.
I just didn't know, because I know that we've had ELL curriculum before. And I didn't know if that was tied to, of course, I was during open court time. So I don't know if that was tied at all to what we were already doing, or if that was a standalone.
So I think, here's how,
That's what it was, yes.
here's how I would describe what we need in this curriculum. We have to assume when a teacher or a team of teachers is left on the hill by themselves to support ELs, what does this provide that teacher? It's not, is the specialist working with them in different models or through different pedagogy strategies? Like, because that's extra support that we're providing through the system. What we need in this particular resource is when you don't have the specialist around, what are things that help those children? And also knowing that those our EL kids are vastly different ranges, right?
Yes.
Newcomer, been in the country for 3 weeks, doesn't speak any English, to I'm almost not in the need of EL services or qualification anymore, right? Like, that's a different level of support, so to speak. And I don't think any comprehensive program we're looking at is going to provide everything we need in that arena. So really, this component is about, you got to provide something though. So how does it, once again, are you intertwining in just your unit description and breakout, and teachers have little side activities to go with? Or is it like at the end of the unit, you actually have a whole separate little component that goes with it that says, so that I think those are probably things that would make sense for the committee to look at.
And it's good to ask, because actually Journeys does have a whole newcomer's guide. Every building got like a newcomer's guide.
Separate
It's
component.
probably gone and lost, and people don't even know they have it, but asking how do you address differentiation of newcomers to students who are
Right.
somewhat fluent?
And then not to throw a monkey wrench in everything, but LEP versus ELL. Is there stuff built in for people who are limited English proficient, but not because they're multi-language learners? So just general.
So actually, the same strategies work.
Right,
They're
right,
not different
right.
strategies,
Right.
so no matter what they are, it's gonna work for both of those
Right.
groups.
And some of that differentiation, right, like that's what we're
Teasing him.
So with that, did we come up with some descriptors on?
So this is what I have so far. Under EL, the descriptor would be descriptions, pictures, and gestures to support EL learners. It honors their home language, instruction that honors their home language, and then differentiated support from newcomer through, and I don't have the word yet, but I'll wordsmith.
exited.
Exited, yeah.
Background knowledge, background knowledge, background knowledge, background knowledge. With the exclamation mark.
Underlined, bolded, italicized, yeah.
So then, and then I also have differentiation that includes special education, and we can call out, gifted and talented as well. 'Cause
Well,
like when I define differentiation, that's how I would define it, but I think it's important that they know that's how we're defining it.
Okay.
And then a homeschool connection is its own little new section there. And then for the technology piece, I have a balance of offline and online opportunities. All right.
There's one more, right?
What?
Yes.
So I was thinking we could add something with regards to community values.
Oh, so
Right.
you're up.
Are you ready? So,
ready.
so Tammy, the reason we were gonna switch facilitators up there, we thought since we're starting from scratch, we would list some things on the board so people have a visual reminder of, and we had a home base on the rubric, so to speak. So because we're kind of starting from scratch, thought first, this particular category, thought was that because most publishers are gonna have it labeled as social emotional learning, we can stay with that as the component. Yeah, you guys got a little hot all of a sudden, didn't you? I know.
You're raising the temperature.
Turn off that fan.
It was cold.
We'll cool it back down. I know. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. Okay, so. I mean, we could call it, physical, mental wellness. We can call it citizenship. We call it a lot of different things. It's been called a lot of different things for a long time. But right now with publishers, they're basically putting it under the umbrella of social emotional learning. So we thought, name the component, what it's going to say in the curriculum, so to speak. Okay, all right. So, and then with that, okay, then start to list some descriptors that would fall under that we want to score. And then in this component, it seems like we would list it in ways that are the opposite of how we list in the rest of the rubric. So the rest of the rubric saying like we word it in a way that, if you meet this, you get the higher score.
Yeah.
This component probably is the opposite. We word descriptors in a way that say, we don't want this, and therefore, we don't see any evidence of it, you're gonna get a higher score. If we see, everybody understand kind of what I'm saying? So how we would word the descriptor would be done slightly different. We're kind of changing gears in this component, so to speak. So with that being said, we can start brainstorming and coming up with some descriptive statements that address what we need to address.
Well, could we still keep it in the positive, but say, what we do want to see? So we want to see a curriculum that encourages self-control or whatever it happens to be.
You can
Instead of the negative.
We can certainly have descriptors that are both. We just need to know what we're, I mean, you're still gonna give a component score, right? We're not into it, but most of these are gonna be worded in a way that you don't have this. I mean, that's what we need to tease out, right? I mean, elephant in the room, what Marco has been addressing since he got here, okay, is there are some things that people don't wanna see.
So I think maybe they should list the things so we know.
So we can start listing,
Yeah.
right, so start,
Well, maybe I can say, I don't know how to describe it, but I can say what people don't want to see. People don't want to see one race being put in a category that's superior to another, or being put in a category that is lesser than another, no matter what race it is. People don't want to be talking about things that are, if they want to stick to English or reading, they don't want to be putting in there social issues that are controversial. Okay, now that's a very,
Yeah, I think you should define that more.
right? How do you define that? But I can tell you that there are some trigger topics right now that people don't want to see. They don't want to see anything that talks about biological sex. That's in biology or sex education. They don't want to see it in a reading class for 3rd or 5th graders that talks about, pronouns and all this thing. Okay, that's another thing. They don't want to see anything that makes one culture more superior than another, or less superior than another. These are basic things to me that I have heard, because people just want us to teach just subjects. And one of the things when it came down to, and I talked to a lot of people about the bond. And I go to the gym every morning and they tell me, I saw this, that you guys were teaching this, or this came up. You guys are not doing a good job. I'm not gonna vote for the bond, things like that. People pay attention. even if it happens once or twice, people pay attention because then they think that it's all over the place. When we know it's not, right? We know it's not. I know teachers mean well, and I know things come up, but these are the things that I want to make sure that we can kind of be really careful and aware of for the community. I love your background in teaching and education. What you guys are talking about in the whole thing, I'm like, man, I can't even say a word because you guys are way above and beyond what I'm, but these are the things that a lot of people, for some reason, is a very it triggers.
Did they give any specifics of books, K-5 level, that they don't wanna see?
No,
Because maybe
yes,
there's no
things that have to do with it. That's
Just
it. I don't know if
specifics
anybody can
of
explain it or if
books
anybody
or
knows what I'm
that
talking
they
about.
don't wanna see.
Under 5th grade, I would say it's gonna be more like these little stories that kind of just plant a question mark, but I think that even the Pete the Cat is not the one that, if they're watching it on TV and stuff, then
You
there's.
said it was a video though, so that's different than the books.
I know, but it's
So
still
the videos are totally different than the books.
understood, but if you've got a book and then the kid's interested in the, I'm just saying, it's just out there as being, I think we just need to look at the parent as the primary, so, yeah, I mean, hopefully, stakeholders, and they are.
There was 2 dads driving a car, is that right?
I wouldn't, I don't know.
In a video.
Maybe, I don't know.
The story.
Really, I mean, they turned it into a silly thing on the video. Again, it's specific to a video, but the actual books do not, they're just silly stories, so
Yeah.
So I think here's once again, so, when we start getting into the list, like, what do we think about Pete the Cat? We think it's fine, we think it's not fine, we're getting back into, once again, are we gonna agree on what we think certain things are, right? So that's why we gotta list descriptions, so what are descriptive things that fit these concerns?
So
So the
if I'm-
concern would
Right.
be,
I would go back to the.
what would you call it?
Let me,
My concern was, I really liked the one had a lot more wholesome kindergarten stories. I felt like they were classical, they were sweet, they were moral, like, there was.
So,
So can I restate what I'm noticing on here? So we want to avoid anything that promotes one race over another or any kind of cultural superiority. We want to avoid controversial topics. Could we just say that we want to promote tolerance of the people around us?
Well, promoting tolerance, that's a big word. I can say, if you talk to my mom,
Mm-hmm.
tolerance can be for her, white people, it's a totally different thing.
No,
You know,
I'm not
No,
following.
but I'm saying that tolerance, it's really up to the individual to define because it's, my meaning is different than yours because of your life experience, right? It's different than everybody's.
So let me rephrase it in a different way, so I can be clearer on what I'm seeing. So if we are looking for a curriculum that teaches our children to respect others around us and treat each other with kindness and equality, would that cover that first one?
I think it's an addition to it. You can put it as an addition.
How is?
Because this is more defined. Yours is more broad.
Like what she's writing is all the good parts of SEL. It's, loving your neighbor and doing all that. That's great. That's biblical, which I think most people have, some of those values, even if they aren't attending church. I think some of it is that are these things potentially downgrading the US and like how our culture, like, I think that starts feeling like we don't want to send our children to school so that they're learning like a very one-sided thing on history being, yeah, we're not perfect. Nobody's saying we're perfect. And the history isn't perfect. But can we point out also positives on, I think if the curriculum is supportive of our being the United States and the good, things too.
So you would like the curriculum to start conversations about the broad, history of the United
No,
States?
I want an undercurrent of positivity in just who we are as a
Yeah,
nation.
So you want a one-sided curriculum?
Is that what you hear?
That's what I
It's too bad.
That's not what it-
So
Not
if,
totally.
I think if we're looking at social emotional learning and we want to look at the positive aspects of social emotional learning, this is what we want to see.
But
We want that.
I don't think that we do not, that's not our focus.
Right.
And so like what I'm hearing Marco say is that based on stakeholders' feedback, these are topics that we need to avoid.
Okay.
The curriculums are gonna have SEL, like that is in everything right now. So we're not talking about what SEL really that we wanna see. I feel like this conversation is, these are your non-negotiables about what you will allow in the curriculum if we adopt it. Is that accurate?
You can read that. I can't tell you how I'm gonna vote or not, but you can read that, that's what the people are telling.
Yeah. But I
And
feel
not
like
just
that's
me,
what you're
A
telling
lot of the
us,
board
right?
members.
So, right.
Yeah.
So back to the original, like, we're kind of not, we're not listing descriptors of what we want. And thank you, Ashley, that was good insight, because we're not adopting an SEL curriculum. We're adopting a comprehensive K-5 literacy curriculum. Keeping in mind that the number one priority of the district is to educate kids in literacy.
Right.
There are some other things that come along with this. Didn't used to, but it does now. So there are maybe some deal breakers for some folks that have to adopt this curriculum, okay? That we need to at least be able to advise them quantitatively and qualitatively on what those particular deal breakers are. And then they can make the choice as to whether it's a deal breaker or not. So with that being said, and I'm just throwing this out as an example, so like in the biological sex thing, like a descriptor would be that somehow, whatever, but nowhere in there are we addressing gender identity
Okay.
in a K-5 curriculum, whether it's got the SEL piece in it or not. You understand what I'm saying? So in other words, we're not addressing gender identity. We're not gonna talk about how do you identify.
We wouldn't be reading stories talking about
We're not gonna be reading stories.
gender identity as the topic.
All right, so it's not about gender, like, so that topic, like, so the descriptor would be, right, like, if part of your SEL activities or possible potential lessons involve that, like, that's, like, we need to have that as a descriptor, because then we're not gonna score that very high, right? We know that doesn't fit our community values, that's not what we want in our K-5 literacy curriculum. So descriptors that say, if you have this, right, and we're not gonna be perfect and catch it all, because once again, we're talking about a topic that means many things to different people, right? I think we can be like specific in gender identity though, that's pretty specific, right? We don't need that in our elementary curriculum.
Right.
So we can say that as a descriptor. You following me? So I need someone in the committee to paraphrase or reword or put into your own words what that statement would look like, so we can say
You capture
yes,
it so I can.
capture
Get
it,
it
so
on the
we
rubric.
can put it on the rubric.
Discussion of gender
Right.
identity.
Or, like,
In the curriculum.
what about just like sexuality as being just we're not gonna go into, controversial sexual talk, like, there's not
But
gonna
then
be.
people-
So
What
you have
is
to be careful with controversial, because.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, like, if we could phrase it with that sexuality, like, our kids, we don't wanna bring I mean, we don't wanna sexualize our kids, we don't wanna bring sex, that's a parent-home thing, so how do you say, let's keep, neutral at school on.
So maybe even just like, you would list a bullet of sexualized content, gender identity,
That's what I call wholesome.
racial bias.
Or like wholesome,
Can you just say no?
That might be good.
No,
I like
that's-
that.
yeah.
Good.
Wait, she's got it.
Actually,
She's got it.
she's looking at the birds down. No, actually.
Wait, you're a teacher, right?
Principal.
Principal.
Oh, man.
I know.
She has all
She's
of
like,
that.
I'm ready for more
What?
tips also.
Yeah. Is that your opinion?
Well,
Would you like me to get
my
you some?
favorite salsa.
So I guess.
But
I
what
guess I'm
else?
still-
I'm just trying
So
to
we
like.
probably
I'm trying to
need
figure
other,
out-
what are we missing?
People could,
I'm just trying to.
No, go ahead.
People, they could take that as, I mean, no, I'm going down a rabbit hole, never mind.
Yeah, I just, so will you repeat the three that we have there?
I listed racial bias,
Mm-hmm.
sexualized content, gender identity.
Okay.
So my thought is like, if you had a header that said topics to avoid, right, or is there presence of?
Oh, and I'll just, I'll throw an example, okay, is like, I'm trying not to go down the rabbit hole either here, but one of the publishers, probably multiple of them, have add-ons that if you are a community that wants some of the stuff, you could go buy it. So you can buy an add-on that part of the multicultural, social, and emotional package that you're buying will talk about things that have to do with gender identity, sexuality, and things that it's pretty heavy in that, right? So I think what we're trying to tease out here, and Ashley did a nice job of being concise here. We're gonna tease out that if you have that as an add-on for communities across the country that want that, that's fine. What we're gonna adopt, we're not adding that on, so it needs to not be intertwined with what you're also offering, right? And so I think those descriptions, I think, are something we can put on a rubric to tease out where do we fall on that. Now, what else would we add to that, I guess would be my next question.
Is this something that we would want to put in the criteria first? Before
That's what I did.
We were circling back to that.
Go back
We're
to.
going to circle back to it. That's part of the plan.
And I would say, and two, Trista, to remember what she said when we brought that up the first time, okay? This is
That was
still,
a while ago.
this is still gonna require us to do our due diligence,
Yes.
because we can't, like,
We can just
we,
trust it
we, yeah,
blindly.
right.
Well, and
exactly. That's why this needs to be in the rubric.
Well, it could be in
I think
both
you could
though,
do it in
because
both
if it was in the criteria and they're like, oh, we have it woven everywhere, we obviously
maybe
can't do
wouldn't.
it.
Right.
Yeah,
It might be in there, not,
So keep that thought in mind. Let's get this rubric done.
Yeah, I do have something to say though, because we're online. I need to apologize to my mom. And I need to say out loud that I don't represent the board. I am a trustee. I can't speak for the board, okay?
we will not see you.
Yes, indeed.
So,
Your mom may, I don't know. Your mom's watching, right?
Yeah.
Totally different.
so it seems like we've covered three pretty specific hot topics that we can put on that rubric. Is there another topic that we want to put on there?
Can you say it again?
I don't have any more.
Racial bias, sexualized content, gender identity.
I have a feeling that the devil's gonna be in the details with those three when it's time to score.
So meaning that we need to add more description to those three in the rubric when we score it?
I am not entirely sure if we do or don't. It sounds, so Pete the cat just came up and it sounds like an objection was that there were two dads
In the movie.
in the movie.
Some kids have two dads.
Right.
So when we talk about, that's the like, I'm thinking, like when we talk about family,
Mhm.
some people only have a mom.
That's
Some
true.
people have a mom, a stepdad,
Mhm.
a dad, a stepmom,
Mhm.
some, like, you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
So are we looking for a term in
I
this,
don't know.
in the
Well-
sexualization? Are we looking for a term that says personal or individual sexualization?
I
And not
think-
necessarily talking about what's the home environment you're coming from?
Correct, because I think that limits our ability to have honest conversations with our kids about their lived experiences.
Well, but you have to be careful
boy that
too.
had
You
two
can't
moms
just,
last year.
you
Yeah.
can't just throw that in there. There's a new thing going on, and I don't know if you're paying attention, where people are actually getting, having relations with animals. And it's starting to grow, the movement, and it's gonna spread. I know it's kind of weird,
In our
but
reading
what's
curriculum.
the limit here? Why do we have to talk about home life?
Home life being.
Why do we have to
So
talk
that means
about
I
home
can't talk
life?
about family.
What?
I can't talk about family. At all. So you're saying I can't talk about family?
I'm just saying, stick to the third subject.
Well,
Kind
the
of
subject
weak,
is.
kind of right.
I do think there's a difference between honoring, okay, I'm gonna take it all the way back to Santa. First grade, Santa every year. And it's kids believe and kids don't believe, and it's first grade now, that's a big deal, right? Your kids say things to you, and as teachers, we try to honor what they say without, you need to go home and talk, do you believe in Santa? Oh, man, I think you need to go home and ask your parents what they think, right? So I think there is, it's, as educators, we walk a fine line of making sure our kids feel valued, because our kids are coming from lots of different situations, you guys know that. So honoring and valuing their situation, but it also doesn't mean we need to have a class discussion about what your family life is like. And that, to me, that's different than,
But it will come up in conversation.
it will
Yeah.
come up in conversation,
We're
but
not
then we have
saying-
to be professional.
And I totally agree. We have to value every kid with how they're living. That, we don't want it, I mean, no matter how ugly or no matter how beautiful, everybody needs to be respected and loved. But it doesn't mean that the whole class has to be involved in that situation. That's all I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But that's,
Yeah.
I don't know how that relates to that, but it,
So here's,
No, the reason why I'm asking is if you're reading a book, it's a picture book. There was a picture book that I got from the library that I read to my kids, and it was about families. It was about different types of families, and it was animals. I don't know. It was like, and one of them said, well, this, families can look like this, and families can look like that, and families can have two daddies, and families can have, a mom and a dad. If you're just simply describing, if there's one random passage, or for example, in something that's in the 4th or 5th grade classroom and somebody comes, it's a kid's personal narrative or whatever, and he says, yeah, I got mad at my whatever, or it happens in passing to mention that this is this person's home life, does that disqualify the entire curriculum?
No more than them bringing up the Bible or anything that is relevant to them. So I think it goes both ways. We're saying, if our kid comes up and says, this is why the Bible is that important to me, it should be no different than a child saying that that's their home situation. But that's
Right, but
I
I'm
don't think it
talking
needs to be
about
taught.
in-
Don't get
I'm
me wrong,
talking-
I think stick with reading, writing, arithmetic, and more of those.
Correct. But we're talking about content of literature, because you gotta read something, right? So if, in passing, in a passage that they're reading in class, it happens to mention that little Billy has two dads, or whatever, he kissed his dad goodnight, whatever. Is that objectionable, and does that remove the entire curriculum because of one passage in passing? I mean, how are we defining these things? And how?
I have an example for that. So last year we were doing the March Book Madness, and I don't remember the name of the book. We didn't come up with a list. It's a national thing for the March Book Madness. And one of the books was a biography about a woman who had overcome all of these obstacles to become part of the Supreme Court or some senator or something. And one of the very last sentences in the book said she was the first, and I don't remember, African-American gay senator, female senator. And of course, we didn't catch it until it was too late. And a girl went home and told her mom, and her mom was really mad that we were teaching this. Well, we weren't teaching it. It just happened to be one definition of who this person was. And so it's that kind of, does that mean the whole book is null and void?
It's hard because again, that's kind of this sexualizing our youth or whatever to think about, like, because you don't say heterosexual, she was a first African-American heterosexual woman, or she had an affair with, too much of it becomes this identity where it's like, I just think
So, and I
these are
think,
more
let me-
traditional
let-
books. You're
And
not
now we're, right, now we're getting in the conversation about how we see these things, right? So I think we need to have a descriptor that's able to say, when we're evaluating, okay, you accidentally had this sentence in 8 of your stories. That's not an accident. There's something else going on there, right? And so you individuals will evaluate that because you saw it a certain way. Others will evaluate it because you saw it a different way. There'll be a quantitative and qualitative that comes out of it, right? Out of 1,000,000 words in a curriculum, we found 3 that we had a problem with. Hopefully we evaluate that fairly and how we would see it as well. So it's not, once again, it is not our job to define straight up black and white, right and wrong, what we'll accept, what we won't accept. This committee needs to advise the board on what their curriculum choice is. And here's the quantitative and qualitative scoring of the committee in regards to these topics. Okay? And so.
Yeah, I love,
Can,
I'm sorry.
do we need to add some more descriptors that can be scored?
I love what we had. I think that's, you know, the devil's in details, maybe, maybe not. We'll see what comes out of it. I think we
And
can
we're
still
gonna have
score
to
it.
use some executive judgment.
Right, we can ask the publisher
And-
if they've got
And
specifics.
Yeah, when they come and do
And when you, right, and that's all part of when you put your number down, right? When you put your number down in this component, that's your evaluation as a committee member. That's you representing whatever part of our stakeholders you are representing in this committee, right? And then it all kind of comes out in the wash. And then, once again, the school board will make the decision. We're advising. So, if we think those 3 descriptors are enough to put a component score, can we say those 3 one more time?
I wrote down individual and somebody said another word that I didn't catch. So I do have, I wasn't sure if you want frequent or just presence.
Well, because that's what we really need to do.
So is,
With these descriptors, I think we need to come up with the actual statement that we're gonna put on there. Okay, I need word for word, what we want on the rubric.
is there presence of racial bias, gender identity, and then I wrote down individual sexualized content. That was the one that I wasn't, someone said another word and I didn't catch it.
I think at this point, right,
I can
script, yeah, I think we're good with the
Well,
whiteboard.
I'm projecting, so you're gonna have to.
Well, I was gonna say, you can screw, you can write like you did.
So
I'm just
if
gonna take a
someone made
picture
a,
of what she has.
we had
Okay.
sexualized we had sexualized content. And then somebody mentioned another, a specific, I don't, Scott, was that you?
I think you did, you know, some, I think it started with an M.
Cause we were talking about that sexualized content
Individual.
and you were saying, well, we're specifically referring to the kids themselves.
Oh,
Is that-
individualized, individual preference?
So I have individual on there.
I would just do sexualized content. I think it's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's individual, that's very hard to figure out for me. I would just leave it, sexual.
Is that enough, what she just said?
You
To
did
me, it is.
mention cultural at one point,
Oh,
Marco.
yeah, true.
You did mention
I did
cultural.
say,
cultural or racial bias could be.
yeah, cultural bias.
Is cultural bias more representative of what we're looking for? Like, is that a better word than racial bias?
Well, culture and race are 2 different things.
So
She's
is,
asking you.
To me are 2
prefer
different things, so I would like to keep them separate.
but list both?
Yes.
Cultural and racial bias.
Got it?
You're good? And keep in mind that the rubric itself, like, we have some time to tweak a little bit. We need to replace a word or put something on, we can, because it's the criteria that is the primary document and ask for the publishers.
Mhm.
Okay, so, we can come back and verify.
Is that something that you're writing down that maybe you should share with everybody?
I just said teach subjects, not agendas, so I feel like that kind of
Basically what
encompasses.
they
Is
said.
that, do you feel like that is shown in what
I
we
think
have?
so, I mean,
Or you think we need to put something else that says something like that?
Oh, interesting. Is your curriculum focus on subjects and not agendas? I don't know. That could be a question.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be one of the avoids,
But
avoid.
that's, I like where we're at.
Agendas,
And yeah,
You think it's
that's
okay?
where we're at. I wrote notes too, if you want.
No, I just, if it's something that everyone needs to know, I just think we should share it and talk about it. So it stay, like, so we all know what's going on.
Okay. I believe now we need to circle back. Well, before we circle back to criteria,
Yeah.
we need to address the weighting. So now maybe this makes a little more sense. We went through this, do all of those components get equal weight? Or are some components weighted different than others? Okay, and we'll just, I'll speak candidly why the top one is weighted the way it is. Okay, and that's because the final decision makers are gonna weight that component more than the rest. They just are. We know that. There's no getting around it. Okay, let me restate that. That's probably a poor word. They're gonna put a lot of weight into that component. I shouldn't say they're gonna give it more weight, but they're certainly gonna give it a good look. So, well, and remember when we're talking about this, we'll build a spreadsheet that ends up with each publisher having a composite number. That's where the ranking comes in, right? And so if we want to weight it to get to it, or everything's just average, right? Everybody gets equal weight. So it's kind of your guys' choice. And then where those numbers weight and how they weight different is also up to you guys. So just kind of throwing this out there. You get to determine. We'll build a spreadsheet. Don't worry about that. I'm here for you. Well, I got people, but. We will get a spreadsheet built out.
I really do like when you put the first one together, though, the first example, because to me, that truly is what, it feels what we're gonna be looking at. Again, I can't speak for the board because I'm not allowed to speak for the board. But I think what he's capturing the first part is very,
No, happy medium.
I know, I think face down, because I get none of it. You're getting all of mine.
I'm getting all of it.
I'm wearing thermals because I came from Wilson Ponce, so I'm like layers here. Well, I have little socks. Nasty.
And
I think that putting a lot of weight on the phonological awareness and the phonics is a good thing, because when we were talking about the two that we were looking at last time, I loved the content in my view for third grade, but because it was so weak in the foundational skills, I voted for Wonders because it had strong foundational skills. I can supplement, but if they don't come to me knowing how to read, then I can't supplement necessarily the way I would like to because they don't know how to read. So weighing it like that, to me.
And I'll add, and once again, but I mean, the more and more science that comes out and the more and more brain research that is coming out, and the brain research is phenomenal now because of the things we can do with understanding what part of the brain is being activated when you're doing certain things. It all is hitting K1 and before. K1 and before, K1 and before. I mean, it is really starting to show that if you don't get them by the end of first grade, it's not guaranteed you're not going to get there, but the struggle is now started.
Real hard.
The struggle has now started. And so that's.
I just wonder though, if we're taking that as being that it needs to be like book learning for littles versus like experiential life things. Like I'm wondering why in the beginning of our country, there was more of a reader, like we're more illiterate now. So Do you think that's because we're shoving things down before their comprehension rate is caught up to where, I don't know. I don't think it means stick a workbook in front of a baby and, you know, like.
No, but what they do is really fascinating. So they have kids who can read, are fluent readers, are reading accurately and at the right rate, and they do a ton of functional MRIs on their brains and have them read while they're doing these MRIs. And they see where it lights up.
Right.
Then we have kids who are poor readers, like their accuracy is way off, they're very slow, they're not able to comprehend, and we do functional MRIs on those brains. And it's lighting up in a different hemisphere of their brain than these other readers. Then we take that group of kids and we do interventions of this is this sound, this is this letter, this is how you write this sound, read some words, and then we scan their brain, and their brains are now reading like the good readers.
Yeah.
And the only thing that we've controlled is we're giving them a phonics and phonological awareness program. So there might be some other studies out where they're out playing too. We haven't seen that intervention
really
is
changed.
necessarily changing their brain.
But what's really changed too, and why it's nice that these have paralleled up, is also like our brains have evolved into a completely different brain when you're 3, 4, 5-year-old now because of what the stimuli we expose our brains to. And so we are not the same 6-year-olds that we were in 1970, 1980, even 1990. Like we just are different. There's no doubt about it. So how does that all play into now we teach you to do the most unnatural thing ever from a brain standpoint, which is reading, right? So it's very complex.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
I'm like, I've taught all 8 of my children how to read, and each one is so different, and I'm like.
And where's that brain at? So
So
are we?
is example 100 points already?
The top one equals 100, yes.
The top one does.
Yes.
Is there any way we could take some from the SEL and move it to assessment and others so they can get the same rank as writing comprehension, vocab, and literacy?
I think so.
So it could just be 7.5, because I feel like the other is huge, right? Technology, EL, it has a differentiation, it has special ed, all in other,
that would
but
be
we're only giving
5.
a 5.
So the
So
proposal
25.
is 7.5 for assessment, 7.5 for other, 25 for.
Right, it would be
SEL.
25 for us, yeah.
I would not change SEL at all.
So you would get,
To me, that component weighs so heavily.
but it's
But still, it would
25,
be
so it's still way
25,
more
and the
than
next
anything
one
else.
would be 15.
It'd be a fourth of the,
Yeah.
25% of the weight would be.
Yeah, it'd be a quarter of the total score.
So you're only taking 5 points away just to make assessment and other the same weight. Because right now you're saying our EL kids really don't matter, they're 2.5 less than some of the other things. And I don't know.
I don't think I'm necessarily saying that it doesn't matter. I'm necessarily, when it comes to everything in there, most of it, I truly trust your expertise and your experience. I really do. And I hear you talk, and I'm truly at awe that you know your stuff, and I respect that. And I think that 70% is so critical, because that is 70%. I just want to make sure that 30% gives us something, just in case we see something.
Let me just say though, I feel like if we know that the trustees are gonna, so say social emotional learning only has 25 points, it almost though makes it like, why even bother? So I don't know that it has to be 30 necessarily for it still to carry the same weight when the trustees get it. Does that make sense? Like when we're ranking?
Right, so when you think about what this does is create that final score, composite score, right? So if your score, if 25% of your score is tanked, you're not gonna, your ranking's gonna be at the bottom.
Yeah, it's gonna, yeah,
Because you can't
so that
overcome
5%
25% and still be up at the top.
or 30%.
Right.
Yeah, but we can take a vote if you guys feel like.
No, I just think it's still a heavy thing where we all know, like, we don't really wanna do this all summer. So I would like the board to love what we say here, and look, it's wholesome and good and not sexualizing our children or degrading race, whatever. So I think
with that, whatever comes out, the board will know we did our best. You know what I mean?
So is,
Just wasn't.
so we have a 30 or we have a 25? If we have a 25, it goes, those 5 points are divided between assessment and other. If you're in agreement with that, give us a thumbs up.
For the 25
Oh,
on SEL.
no. Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, taking
Yes.
5 from the 30 and
So
giving
it's still
that
at
5.
25 more than
So
anything
those
else.
numbers would be 7.5 until we get social emotional learning, and that would be 25. We're not touching the 215s.
So how many were thumbs up? 1, 2, 3, yeah, they get the, so it's 25.
So composite score is gonna be 15, 15, and then 7.5 for fluency, 7.5 for vocab, 7.5 for comp, 7.5 for writing, 7.5 for assessment, 7.5 for other, and it'll be 25 for the social emotional learning.
That's still
Or-
a really heavy number.
Or maybe just other random idea, you take those half points off of fluency through writing and add a point to assessment and a point to other, so it'd be 7, 7, 7, 6, 6. I don't know, because I don't vote in this, I'm just throwing out examples. Okay, the ship sailed, it sailed. Oh,
Okay, so now, if we're in agreement there, we will circle back and agree on criteria.
right,
And then our last agenda item is to make sure we're all in agreement on who we're going to invite. Um,
Like invite for what?
Uh,
Publishers?
Yes, we will invite, we're gonna send the criteria out in an invitation to publishers and then give them 2 weeks to respond to the criteria within a correlation and to send us samples.
Okay.
Okay, so, sorry, Tammy.
They're out there, like, what?
One there
Yeah.
too.
oh, I have a list, we'll get there.
We'll get there.
I'm like.
Circle back to criteria first.
Now that we've talked through all this, is there anything we wanted to circle back and add to criteria? And Tammy, I'm gonna start talking a little bit so you can write and then
Do you want me to say what I've already captured that we've added?
Sure, remind everybody.
Yep, so we are adding a scope and sequence bullet. We are adding a special education bullet. We're adding a multilingual bullet. A bullet about how it addresses background knowledge. A bullet on how, oh, this is what we needed to wordsmith. How do you address challenging topics? Which is what that was supposed to encompass. So how do we change that bullet to say what we wanted to?
Well, the other thought though too is, guys, now that we've built the rubric out and we know we're gonna share the rubric with them,
More than challenge.
Yeah, I
Right.
think I would take,
so
thinking
do,
about the rubric and the weight of our rubric, then I would take out the sped, I would take out the EL, I would even take out like, how is technology embedded to enhance teacher, because they're gonna have technology. I mean, I don't know any curriculums that aren't going to have that. So I would take that.
There's
out.
all
these weird,
No, there might be one.
Okay. But then we'd see it on the rubric. So do we really need it for our criteria?
well, but we're, not everybody gets the rubric. Right?
So they aren't getting the rubric.
We use, no, I meant, we don't use the rubric on everybody. So we need to get to 4 before we start using the rubric.
But our
So-
heaviest weight is the SEL descriptors,
Well,
right?
but saying on the criteria, what we're asking them to describe is how they do these things. So how we pair things to 4 is gonna be on how they describe them meeting the criteria. So I would leave technology in, because that allows, because if you don't have it, then you can't describe it. That needs to weigh into the decision when you get the top 4.
This is to narrow down the board.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
So we do need to
yeah,
figure out,
address it.
yeah.
So
But this
could you
needs
just
to be
change
in there,
it, so
right?
it said, how do you approach challenging, sensitive, challenge/sensitive topics?
But
Such
they're not,
as-
gonna- they're not gonna have the same definition.
No, I
Like,
think
you
we
have to
add
put-
what you said
Yeah,
right there.
But you said they're getting the rubric.
no.
No,
They're gonna
they're
get-
not.
They have to
Yeah.
narrow it down.
No. We're gonna send them the rubric.
Oh,
they
I'm
are.
saying
See it.
we're not
You're
gonna
not
use the
gonna
rubric
evaluate them on.
Yeah,
until we get to 4.
all the ones we pick, we'll get all of this information. So if we just put that as the bullet,
Then they'll see in the rubric.
then they'll see in the
specific
rubric,
things.
but.
Yep.
Maybe.
Okay, I thought you were just saying that they won't see the rubric
No, I'm saying we won't use it. That's what I would say,
for the
why I would
technology one.
why I would leave technology in is because we're not gonna use the rubric till we're down to 4. So we need them to speak to what is the digital, what's the digital.
And
component.
well, I think we need to
So-
decide what we're naming this, because then that's going to define how we write that bullet in the criteria.
I would suggest intertwining it in with your sensitive topic.
Yeah.
So how do you address? Go.
Could we take off
Almost, honestly.
title SEL? Just because
I know
like,
it's too broad.
yeah, and like what, as elementary, like what we know as SEL is. this is how
Right,
you
they're
get
not
along
gonna
with
address it.
friends, This is how
Right.
we're.
They're not going
So
to
I don't
address
think
that.
we should
No,
include
I
that
don't think
on
you put
there.
even SEO.
No.
Right,
Yeah.
so what do we call it?
Sensitive issues.
Sensitive issues.
Or could you even call it like stakeholder concerns?
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
I think that's better.
Yeah.
Stakeholder
Once
concerns.
again, what's sensitive to
Right,
one community
Yeah.
isn't sensitive to another.
It also explains why,
right.
So-
why we're asking the question.
Stakeholder
Right.
concerns.
Or,
yes.
but are you envisioning like them saying that we can tweak the curriculum? Like, how do you envision them answering that? How do you address stakeholder concerns? Well, we reach out to you and discuss it and
Oh, I
come
was
up with
thinking,
a,
I was just thinking it was the heading, like stakeholder concerns, and
And
then
then the
I would
bullet
say,
points.
Yeah,
is there the presence of?
so on the criteria, I'm gonna say, how do you address stakeholder concerns? And then I'm gonna bullet our 4 bullets on the criteria sheet. Okay, got it.
That's,
Yeah.
Okay.
Or sensitive topics such as.
Got it. Okay.
And then I will be interested to see how they answer.
Okay.
yeah.
Probably the first time they've ever been asked.
It's not.
No.
And they know what they're doing. They're ready.
All right,
Okay.
and so then we move to who we're inviting. Correct.
Yes, and then also.
Yeah.
I think this is an easy question, just what do you want to investigate?
I also think we can determine.
We can
this
do
when
that
we
later.
Open
Yep.
the next meeting in
We
which we're
can.
actually doing it.
Yes,
Yeah, we got time on that.
all right, so the top ones, our state-approved publishers. So the ones that have submitted stuff to the state that the state is vetted, and we get special pricing with these people.
And I would like to qualify that publisher. Now, because the state is on a 5 or 6 year cycle, some of these publishers have changed the name of their curriculum, HMH. So like right now, the state has HMH, but it still has the journeys because they haven't completed their next cycle. So keep in mind, we're saying publishers are on the approved list currently.
And we're always gonna be off no matter what, because their
Little bit,
cycle
yes.
is a lot shorter than what we can afford to buy new.
So just a question, are we gonna have, Savas come again and?
Yes, the whole process starts
If
over.
they're part of the 4, we're only bringing up to 4. So if they're in the top 4 after the criteria, then yes, they will come in.
So is there anybody you're not interested in sending the invite to, who's gonna send us the correlation off of what we're asking and send us samples?
Wasn't iReady the one that was like the lowest on the screener?
Did you guys get a list of publishers before, or so?
So that.
You just go out to the Idaho State Department
So that's
site.
the Idaho State.
And
The only thing I've heard is, I know Tracy told me or sent me an email about Hillside College, so for her benefit, I'm gonna choose that to be part of it. I don't know the other ones, so I'll leave it up to you.
So it's
Yeah,
not,
that's why it's on there.
if it's not state approved, what does that mean?
Yeah,
Nothing.
and it looks
doesn't
like
mean
it's a,
anything. So it's not like the state's gonna be like, oh, we'll give you less
Here's-
money, or you have to use one of these.
No.
You know?
No,
No.
no.
it looks like it's a primarily homeschool curriculum. I don't,
They have Treasure Valley Classical Academy, it's doing
They
really
have-
well,
yeah.
it's in Fruitland. And
We'll,
now they're starting a new one, Novus in Avonmore,
And they're
Avonmore.
state approved because it's already been used.
They're charters, and they're doing really well.
their
What-
charter.
And there's another school up north that uses it, I can
I
find
feel
it.
like they want it on there, so put it on there.
Oh, it's,
Remember, we're just,
Yeah.
this is the invitation. You send us.
Well, they're gonna send us
Yeah.
a-
If you want more.
any
But-
more.
Yeah.
Probably the question would be more to, like educators knowing, like, is there one up there that you're like,
iReady, if I'm remembering correctly, was highly on the technology side. Like, it was overly,
it is?
and that's not a balanced.
I would say though, this committee needs to probably make that determination.
Okay.
Let's, if we're gonna narrow it down to 4 after we see what they bring it back, might as well send it to everybody. Then we can weed through.
Is there anyone we need to add?
Anything else we're missing?
Hey, I'm still looking through all my notes. Look at how many weeks I got, people.
Of to add, we're not talking about eliminating.
How about the real core knowledge?
Not the amplified?
Yeah, isn't the amplified like a, not,
I think it's the only version of core knowledge you can buy yet now.
is it? Okay, I thought that it was like,
But if you find one,
I thought that it was,
send it to me.
I thought that it was well, we can't do this core knowledge, so we'll do this core knowledge. That was similar, but not the same.
In our first meeting.
I don't remember.
These are the ones that
Core knowledge is a lot of teaching ELA through history stories.
Which is what amplified is.
Yeah.
And like, they do it back east, and I don't remember where, but when I've looked into it, it's like, in kindergarten, they're studying like ancient Egypt, and they just build all of this world history as it goes, and it just builds throughout the grade levels, and it's just a fantastic way to teach history instead of, your junior year of high school and you're just memorizing dates. And so it's a lot of building,
Like chronological, like timeline?
I don't know if it's chronological. I know that each grade level has specific things, specific areas or something, and I'd have to go back and look. But, it's teaching it through stories instead of. I know.
No, that is, I think if you find something that's not, I believe that core knowledge language arts is
the
Natalie
Natalie Wexler book, Core Knowledge?
Yes, I believe
Okay.
that is what that is.
Okay, because I went through at one point and I downloaded, because they have all the free resources, and I was downloading them and going, oh, I need to do this, but I can't do this because they didn't learn it last year and.
But if you find out it's different, let me know.
Okay.
This is probably a really dumb question, but inquiring minds want to know what are people using where they're really successful in their testing? They're getting high test scores in literature-based, all these subjects. What are they using?
Are you looking at IRI or ISAT or SAT? What, depends on what test you're looking at.
And they're using all of them.
Oh, really? Okay,
Because
so
it has
there's
so
no
much-
clear,
It has
this,
so much to do with pedagogy,
Yeah.
systems,
Yeah.
The clientele you serve.
just wanted an easy.
Right, and because
So do we.
so do we, and that's
We
why
all want that.
we always say, if there was one that was magically working, everybody'd have it.
Well, I always say that, and
And
then
so,
I'm
yeah.
like, no, not
And
everybody
that's-
is.
And that's why really, it's a curriculum resource. The better it meets our needs, the better chance we have that we're gonna be successful, but we're not gonna be successful because of the resource.
Right. I think
Yeah,
that.
research just shows that, but within reason, you can't just willy-nilly throw a resource out there, you need the best. But I wish I had a better answer for you, but the answer is, it's all over the place, and that's just, sadly, that's just the way
You
it
guys
is.
should mark off it.
I just want something that's not too cumbersome on our teachers, that they can navigate through it very, and that's something we're gonna ask the publishers when they can.
So, all right, so I'm not hearing anybody with any
Oh.
suggestions.
We do have one more thing, dates.
Yeah, but I was gonna say,
Oh,
I
okay.
wasn't gonna end the meeting, I was
Oh.
just gonna say, that's who we're inviting. Everybody's got that? Okay, that's who we're
I
inviting.
had heard you guys at 8 in the fall, no? 8?
7.
7?
Oh,
And is that pretty much all of them?
yeah,
Yeah, those are the ones.
Yeah, but there was one more.
There was one that I think
Yeah.
we just weren't interested in.
oh, yeah, that,
What we
Yeah.
learned
Yeah.
through that, we just wouldn't view it as a comprehensive, so we didn't put it on the list. If
I don't
someone
know what it was.
wants to put it on the list, they can, I just don't think we would.
no,
We wouldn't entertain it. Really think this qualifies.
No, that's great. Why add any? But I was like, well, are we missing anything?
there were not, yeah, there definitely wasn't 8.
So,
Yes.
Meeting dates?
Meeting dates. So these were the dates that all, that you all came out, like, most of you could be here. The two up here, Jan indicated she could not be here on the 4th, and Trish indicated.
I
she
have
could-
changed my thing on the 9th,
Oh, so
so I'm
the
not,
9th is
I'm
now
not-
everybody.
I will be gone. That is our Senate is done. We are out of here.
Woohoo! Nice.
So I would add a couple things here real quick. One, obviously, Tammy so optimistically wants to put 7 on the back end of these. I don't think we have that luxury. So I don't think these are gonna be 5 to 7. They're gonna start at 5. I wouldn't say they're gonna complete at 7. Okay? The other piece is we are going to live stream and record these. So like if you can't be for a
That's what I
publisher
thought.
presentation,
Yeah, I can watch.
you still have the ability to go, at least see the presentation, see the questions, and then obviously, when you get back in town, you have access to all the materials that we have. So, I would say the 20th and the 11th are probably the dates that you're gonna play the most important role in regards to the committee, in regards to being present. So are those 2 dates still not conflicting with anybody?
I have something on the 20th, but I didn't realize, no.
wait, the 20th of
April.
Oh, I was gonna say, the 20th of May is a Saturday, that's the.
We think that one's gonna be long, so we figured.
It's gonna be an all day.
7 a.m.
As long as you bring food.
Oh, we're bringing food.
So on May
Food will be
4th, are you
Right.
gonna?
That's May.
These are presenter or publisher presentations, those 2 middle ones.
And I will watch.
The 4th and the 9th, so the 9th, if we're going to be past 7, like Chris posed a problem, I have the boys on the 9th. So I'll have to figure out something there.
Okay. All right, then we don't need to worry about doodling again.
We can stay with those dates,
Awesome.
and with any luck, we won't need to add another one, but
And the 4:30 to 7, that's the open house? Or
No, 4:30 to 7:30 is decision day.
when is, can we
open house?
bump it back to
Yeah,
5
quick,
by any chance? My son doesn't get off the bus until 4:30.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
We can
Yeah.
do 5 to
Okay.
whatever time,
now that we know there's not an end date, right?
an end time, yeah.
So we don't have open houses yet because that requires more than just Tammy and I organizing staff availability. And so once we kind of get an idea of who we need to have for open house, when they get the materials to us, and then how we can build a schedule when people can man it, we'll get that out.
But also be aware that we're now going to start meeting at the downtown warehouse after this meeting. So on April 20th,
Can you send us an email?
yep, I will also send an email, but just
4:30 so that we come here and then we go there.
We will send multiple emails
yes, so 5 o'clock
reminding everyone,
on the 20th.
yes, that we're downtown. Do you, yeah. Does everybody know where this building is?
No.
Okay, so
I know where the
it is where the old bicycle project was. It's in between the old Lloyd's lumber and the, whatever
The
brewery.
water, the Meridian irrigation.
Yeah.
It sits down there, right, it's right there.
Is it on the same block as the warehouse?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
yes.
It's just separated by the alley that
Right.
goes to Crescent
So
Brewery.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, so when we're at Puppy Mondays, we're looking at like the side and the back maybe of it, and you go like.
I'm picturing over by
The old stairs.
Yeah.
I think it's kitty corner.
And.
You can probably see it from there.
Yeah.
And restore, it's been so many things, so Puppy
Yeah.
Mondays.
I thought this was just in front of the warehouse.
It is.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right.
It's just the building on the corner,
Yeah.
and if you kept driving, you'd hit the warehouse.
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
yeah, you're good.
Good. And we'll put a sign out. Maybe,
Balloon.
or I'll stand, we'll see what the weather's
We'll
like.
send
I might be
Scott out to
standing
the
out.
corner.
So, all right,
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Good to meet you. Thank you.
Yes. I
yes.
That would be nice if
That-
that.
Yeah.
For us. Oh,
I sleep
because I
alone.
got the calendar invites last week when I accepted it, added it to
Now,
now.
this is just like-
Kids are
My Google
Are
Calendar.
you gonna be home? Can we eat?
Can
we eat?
I have one for the-
As a
No.
calendar invite.
I left No, the first,
I was
the
like,
first
I gotta
set
get
of
another
things.
kid to get the kids in here.
Back
for
when we
the
first
you know, I don't want.
I'm happy doing it with your email address, I just don't know.
Yeah, I don't-